Good evening. Good afternoon. Welcome. This is Staying Home with Josh Fox, your revolutionary guide to the Green New Deal. This is the very first episode of this program that we're having on the Young Turks TYT network. We're very grateful to be here with you. If you are just first tuning into this program, this is a guide to the Green New Deal. Every day on this program, we go into a different aspect of the Green New Deal. The Green New Deal that globe-spanning, world-changing proclamation, which is more than a plan, more than a piece of legislation, more than a resolution. It is a philosophy, it is an ethos, it is a value system, it is a way forward. So we talk about the Green New Deal, we talk about why in this moment of pandemic, the Green New Deal and focus on the environment and on climate change is such a vitally important reaction and response to the coronavirus. We know that the fossil fuel industry itself is a global pandemic. The fossil fuel industry kills 5 to 7 million people every year in air pollution. How does that happen? You get heart disease, you get lung disease, you get cancer, you get a whole host of other ailments that the fossil fuel industry and industrial production and pollution create. 5 to 7 million people die of that every single year. That costs us $30 trillion in healthcare costs. Additionally, the fossil fuel industry is a cofactor in the death rate and the fatality rate and the severity rate of the coronavirus. If you have heart disease, if you have lung disease, if you have cancer, then you're at a much greater risk of dying from coronavirus or having a really severe coronavirus. So we cannot say that people are dying just of coronavirus. They're dying of the coronavirus and comorbidities that are many of which are pushed onto the general population by air pollution by the fossil fuel industry. Now, unlike the coronavirus, we have a cure for the global pandemic of fossil fuels. It's called the Green New Deal. The Green New Deal is a globe-spanning, world-changing, philosophical document, which is like a mighty river of all the different streams of environmentalism that have come to us for years and years. That document, the Green New Deal, that vision, is the gathering of so many different strands of what we think of as the environmental movement. It's about renewable energy. It's about creating 100% renewable energy and replacing the fossil fuel industry. It's about creating 20 million new jobs. It's about justice for frontline communities, Native communities, and people of color. It's about infrastructure development, such as trains and broadband. It's about reducing emissions, rejoining the Paris Accords. It's about conservation of public lands. And it's about taking the greed of the fossil fuel industry on head on and saying, we're going to move on as a world. And that means a fundamental shift in so many of the things and so many of the values that we hold right now in our society. It means a shift away from greed. It means a shift away from competition. It means a shift away from racism, from so many of the things that are the hallmark of the fossil fuel era. And it means embracing a very different way of thinking about the world, a very different way of seeing the world, a very different way of taking care of the environment and acting on climate. So that's what this program is about. Staying Home with Josh Fox, your revolutionary guide to the Green New Deal. And I'm extremely happy to have as my first guest on this program, since we've moved over to Young Turks, Bill McKibben, a man that I've learned more than I can say from, a man who has, I think of as, one of the originators of our climate movement right now, writing the very first book for a general audience on climate change back in 1989. A man who started the divestment, well, I wouldn't say, he wouldn't say started, I would say, but encouraged the divestment movement, started 350.org, a man who organized civil disobedience campaigns against the Keystone XL pipeline, a brilliant mind, a terrific writer, and a person who is the best possible voice to start off this discussion with us here today. So, Bill McKibben, first of all, it's great to see you. Thank you so much for coming
Brother,
on the show.
what a pleasure to be with you, and many thanks for having me there in your house. And
well, we're in the theater. We're in the theater.
It's good to see the banjo over your shoulder too.
Well, we did do a little set dressing for our spiffy opening on TYT. This is actually a theater. It used to be the 5-car garage. Since this house, this beautiful place in Pennsylvania, I have no need for that. We painted it, we turned it into a black box theater, and we've done a lot of work here, and it's become the studio. So we have this little stove in the back, and yeah, there's some.
I can just walk out the door into the woods, so I have no complaints.
Right. Well, and it is one of those moments where the natural world is beckoning to all of us, right? I've been hearing from people from Brooklyn to Europe, all across the world, that the sky is bluer, the air feels fresher, that there is this very strange mix of, in the midst of all this horrifying grief, in the midst of all this extraordinary hardship and terror, and yet somehow the blue sky seems to be calling us to a different type of a dream. And I think a dream in line with a lot of the things that you have been talking about for so many years.
Let's talk for a minute about you want to talk about the pandemic and kind of what a few lessons, because I keep thinking hard about this,
Hmm.
and it does seem to me that there are I mean, there's no silver linings to a pandemic. It's mostly pain and fear all the way down. But if you're going to go through that pain and fear, perhaps there's a few lessons worth learning along the way. And it does seem to me that there's a couple of things that really, three things that just keep pounding themselves into my head. One is the brute basic reminder that physical reality is real. Now, that sounds dumb to say, but we live in a world where everybody's just manipulating data on screens all day. So sometimes it gets hard to remember that we don't actually set the rules. I've spent 30 years trying to convince people that physics and chemistry are real and that they don't negotiate or compromise. And the COVID microbe is doing the same job for biology. Does not matter that our leader, stands at his lectern and yowls about it's a hoax or whatever. The microbe could care less. And if it says stand 6 feet apart, then you got to stand 6 feet apart. It's setting the rules. That's how reality works. The second thing, and it's a corollary to that, is something that you know very well from following the climate debate for a long time, which is that speed really matters. I mean, look, the U.S. and South Korea found out about the coronavirus, I think, on the same day, had their same case, first case. So South Koreans are like, okay, no more large gatherings, and we're going to test the hell out of everyone. We're going to disrupt things some and try to deal with this. As of this morning, I think it's been 5 days since there's been a new case in South Korea, which is a country of 51 million people.
Wow.
So we instead, it's like we don't want to disrupt anything, and there's going to be a miracle, and the cases will go to zero, and Easter's coming, and like whatever, nonsense.
I think we had Easter somewhere in here in the
Yeah.
last couple of weeks. I think.
Yeah.
I don't remember it well, but I think it happened.
And since we didn't do anything at first, since we delayed, then when we disrupted, we had to disrupt like hell. We had to lock down the whole economy. And B, even with all the trouble that lockdown caused, which was beginning to look like it's spelled with the capital D depression, even with all that trouble, you still get hundreds of thousands of people dead or sick. You still get filling tractor trailer trucks outside of hospitals in Brooklyn with bodies, and it's the perfect analog to the climate crisis. Had we, 30 years ago, when the scientists told us to, began to flatten the carbon curve, we could have done very modest, non-disruptive things, a little price on carbon, that kind of thing, and we'd be in a very different place now. But since the oil industry mostly did everything possible to make sure that didn't happen, now we're in a place where the disruptions, we still have to move with speed. That's all that matters at this point is speed. But now the disruptions have to be fairly large. And even if we do everything right, we end up with enormous trauma. Look, it was only, Josh, what, like 13 or 14 weeks ago that we were all standing there slack-jawed watching Australia burn to the ground, you know?
Mhm.
We're now, April was the hottest April ever measured on this planet. It looks like there's a 75% chance that 2020 will be the hottest year we've ever recorded on planet Earth, even though there's no El Nino underway. So
Right.
delay is fatal and speed's good. The third lesson, the thing that really just keeps pounding home to me is social solidarity really matters. Um, you and I, me more than you since I'm old, have lived our political lives in the shadow of Ronald Reagan, which means in the shadow of the idea that markets solve all problems, that our main job is to get rich and so on. And and I mean, what was Reagan's big laugh line all the time? The 9 scariest words in the English language are, I'm from the government and I'm here to help. Ha ha ha. Well, it turns out the scariest words in the English language are, sorry, we're out of ventilators, or the hill behind your house is burning, you better get the hell out of your house. And
Right.
there's nothing that you can, markets are not going to solve those problems. Governments are going to solve those problems. Government's just another name for people coming together to do things jointly. And so that lesson maybe begins to sink in. I guess we'll have a better understanding of whether it's sunk in or not when we get to November and see if we want to carry on this particular political legacy or not.
You're watching Staying Home with Josh Fox, your revolutionary guide to the Green New Deal. My guest is Bill McKibben, the originator of 350.org and a climate champion campaigner that many of you probably know. So, Bill, I had a mutual friend on the other day, Crazy Boy Gitz, and he was talking about, from up in Alberta, right? Who I love, and we always have a good time. And he was on the program, and he was talking about how his culture is all about dreaming into the future, right? This idea that there's a dream that we have to get clearer on. And I was talking also with Levi Sanders, Bernie Sanders' son, and he was saying this is a global call to introspection. And I thought those two things sort of go together in this
Hmm.
very bizarre cocoon mindset. When the caterpillar turns into the cocoon, it liquefies. It becomes this ooze where there's sort of maybe a brain in there somewhere, and then it magically rearranges itself through this unknown process to this other creature. Is the Green New Deal that dream? If it isn't in toto, what is the other parts of that dream that you're thinking of? What is this moment of uh, introspection bringing you, apart from the three things that you just discerned, which are so incredibly important to think about the now? What about the future?
Well, first of all, what fun to think of Crazy Boy. I haven't seen him in a long time. I remember though so well at the start of the Keystone Pipeline fight, him down there in DC spreading his power, and it was serious power. Um, um, I think, I don't think endlessly about where we're going to end up. Okay. Because I just don't have that good a mind for figuring it out. That's why I'm
Mhm.
glad that we have people like you or Naomi Klein or other people kind of really thinking about destinations. And I'm always most interested in trajectories. Are we headed in the right direction or the wrong
Mhm.
direction?
Mhm.
Partly because I know I'm not going to live long enough to see whatever thing we're getting to, someday, but I have a daughter, so I think a lot about what the world will look like, uh, what it could look like going forward. I wrote a cover story for Time last autumn, and it was imagining that one was in 2050 and that we'd kind of won this fight and looking back and wondering how we'd gotten there. And of course, winning this fight, the climate fight, doesn't mean that we stop global warming. That's no longer on the menu. We've already melted half the sea ice in the Arctic. Most of the Great Barrier Reefs died. I mean, we don't, those are not things we can reverse. And there are going to be plenty more things, and they're going to be plenty worse. But winning at this case looks like, can we stop short of cutting off what we call civilization at the knees? Can we leave behind, really, can we keep the fight going so that new generations can take it on, or will we lose it in our lifetime? And looking back from 2050, I mean, I think what is most clear is that any working dream of the future requires that kind of solidarity that I was describing. And the best thing about the Green New Deal is that it understands that, encapsulates that in some serious way. It doesn't just talk about carbon prices and solar panels and things. Though those things are very important, they're in the context of a world where we take seriously all kinds of human beings, where we won't tolerate the kind of insane inequality that's led directly to the situation that we find ourselves in, on and on and on. Those things don't even seem radical to me. They seem powerfully commonsensical. What seems radical to me is what we're doing right now. I think there have never been radicals on our planet anything like the fossil fuel companies. If you're willing to get up every morning and alter the atmospheric chemistry of the one planet we've got, and you're willing to do it after scientists have told you what will happen, and then you're willing to do it after you've seen the scientists' predictions coming true, then you're an honest to God radical, man.
Yeah.
And in some weird way, the rest of us are sort of conservative. I mean, I get completely what Crazy Boy says about dreaming into the future, but I know that part of that dream has to do with the past too, and a connection to that past.
For sure.
Like, boy, it would be nice to live on a world where there was a little bit of ice at the top and the bottom and the odd coral reef in between. It would be nice if some of the species that we came into this planet with were still there when we left. Those seem to me like conservative goals. And so I think that there's room for all kinds of people to be making this case together.
So you've always, to me, I always think about you as a person not just obsessed with trajectory, but also with strategy, which is that always about what steps are we going to take now to have the most profound impact strategically, right? So founding 350.org was a strategy that came about after you started the strategy of writing about climate change, which was about increasing awareness. And now it's about getting active and letting people know these are the limits that we can have of carbon in the atmosphere unless you be active about that. And then it became about the Keystone XL pipeline as a way to create a climate test for the Obama administration. And then as we both went out, me with my banjo, much to your chagrin, yeah.
So the good news is that those fights that everybody engaged in, like Keystone, that worked pretty well. I mean, not only did we stop the Keystone pipeline so far, but it encouraged everybody to fight everything, So now, everybody fights every pipeline, every coal mine, every frack well, and we win an astonishing percentage of those fights.
It's
I'm
pretty
always amazed.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing how many of those fights we've actually managed to win. Yeah, for sure.
Divestment, when we started it, it was like, well, we'll see. And the very first college to divest was a place called Unity College in Maine with an $8 million endowment. By last autumn, we were up to the University of California system with an $80 billion pension and endowment. Last week, Oxford University, the most prestigious university on planet Earth, divested. In the meantime, the country of Ireland has divested all its public accounts. The Norwegian Sovereign Wealth Fund, the New York City Pension Fund, we're at $14 trillion. It's become the largest anti-corporate campaign in history. So your banjo did some good, brother. and the The next part of this strategy that appeals to me is extending this kind of one ring out to take on the financial institutions that bankroll that fossil fuel industry. So that's why we started this stopthemoneypipeline.com to take on the big banks and insurance companies and asset managers. The article I wrote for the New Yorker at the beginning of that coalition had the unwieldy title of "Money is the oxygen on which the fires of global warming burn." Okay, but it's true, and so I've been impressed with how well, in the course of a year, a lot of this work has gone. I mean, people have been doing it longer and really good and powerful advocates, but in a bunch of kind of small, somewhat disconnected efforts, and now they're much more connected, and the results have been pretty amazing. In January, BlackRock, which is the biggest asset manager on the world, but really it's the biggest box of money on planet Earth. Something like $1 in 8 on our planet resides in their digital vaults. Okay, so it was a big deal when its CEO said in January, "Look, we're going to start. Climate change is undermining our economic assumptions, and it's going to have to be at the heart of everything we do." That was a big deal. We'll see how it plays out.
Right.
Trust but verify, and so we're pushing hard to make sure that they vote the right way. The next target was Chase Bank, the biggest J.P. Morgan Chase, biggest bank in the world, biggest fossil fuel lender in the world. And we had a big victory there last week. For those of us who really care about the history of all of this, a kind of epochal victory. There was a man named Lee Raymond, who was CEO and president of Exxon in the 80s and 90s, back in the days when Exxon pioneered corporate climate denial, back when their scientists were telling them that the planet was warming, and back when they were telling the rest of us it weren't. And that guy, Lee Raymond, when he retired with a payout of $686 million from Exxon, his retirement hobby job was being lead director of the board of Chase Bank, biggest fossil fuel lender in the world. So it was, people mounted a campaign to keep him from being renominated. 10 days ago or so, Scott Stringer, who's the comptroller of the city of New York, said they'd vote the city's shares against him. That was the good moment. And then behind the scenes, I think a lot of other people, probably including BlackRock, piled on, because a few days later, Chase said they caved. They said, okay, he's out. He won't be the lead director of our board anymore.
Wow.
That was a big deal. We'll see its exact practical significance, but its symbolic significance was clear. The kind of buddy-buddy relationship between the fossil fuel industry and the financial industry is beginning to crack. And that's crucial because the goal has always been to break the political power of the fossil fuel industry.
You're watching Staying Home with Josh Fox, your revolutionary guide to the Green New Deal. My guest is author and climate campaigner, Bill McKibben. So, Bill, thank you for that summary. And I'm so happy. And people can get involved, I imagine, at that website as well.
Yes, stopthemoneypipeline.com.
So you and I were both, you to a much greater degree than I, in 2016, involved in the writing of the Democratic platform. And that was a fascinating moment where we saw this very emboldened and very strong Bernie Sanders campaign, really a very progressive wing of the Democratic Party, sort of duking it out with the Clinton campaign. And we had a lot of really significant victories on that platform, which we had a 100-day summit on climate change planned within the platform. We had a disincentivization, I guess that's a terrible word. We were going to stop fossil frack gas power plants. That was an amendment that we had a very storied chapter creating. There was so much great stuff, criminal justice reform, marijuana legalization. There were amazing things that happened at those hearings, right? When you had the sort of punk rock, Bernie Sanders activist group with the sort of battling against the sort of three-piece suited, cuff-linked red, white, and blue styrofoam hats of the Clinton side, and we had this sort of red, white, and blue hair, and that was an amazing moment. And this time around, you stayed out of it. You stayed out of the fray of the primaries. And we have a candidate, presumably, that is pro-fracking. What are some of the things that we need to do to continue to push that dialogue as if we were doing, or maybe we will be on that platform committee again, who knows? But what if we were, what would you want to see on it?
Well, I think the good news is that Bernie, who I, have worked with and for a very long time, Bernie may have lost the fight this time through, and sadly so. I mean, in fact, I ended up doing some work for him in the campaign, but he may have lost the fight, but I think he's more or less won the war. The Democratic Party is going to be more progressive than that platform, I think, was in 2016, because I think they have no choice. That's where people are now. And so, even Joe Biden is saying things that we could not possibly have gotten. I mean, he said on day one, there'll be no more drilling or mining on federal lands in the US. It's a big deal. Federal lands in the US, taken as a whole, are the fourth or fifth largest source of carbon on the planet. I mean, after
Wow.
the US, China, Russia, Saudi Arabia. So, that kind of thing is a big shift. More to the point, the only reason to elect anyone, as far as I can tell, is so that you have some hope of pushing them around. It's not like had Bernie won, we instantly get nirvana. That's not how political systems work. It's that you then have to go fight. So the reason to elect Biden is the same reason as to elect Obama, because you have some chance of pushing them. The problem with Trump, aside from the fact that he's a witless buffoon, the other problem with him is that there's no way to push him.
You can't.
He does not care, not the slightest interested, and doesn't perceive you as a political possibility, friend, ally that matters, enemy that matters. Doesn't care. So it's really important to be able to have people there that you can push. I worked for Barack Obama, and then I think, helped organize what I think were the biggest demonstrations outside the White House during the Obama years, around the Keystone Pipeline, to push the hell out of them. And I'm, looking forward to, and truthfully, when Bernie asked me to introduce him in 2016, the day he announced for office, I said, yes, that'll be great. I'll really enjoy doing it. And I did. I introduced, but I said, you got to understand, Bernie, if you get elected, 6 months in, I'll be chained to your door in the White House too. And to his, great credit, because that's who he is, Bernie said, well, I wouldn't have it any other way, So political struggles go on and on and on. And the only thing I dislike is the idea that that if you don't get everything you want immediately, then they're not worth engaging in. That be nice if that's how it worked, but it doesn't appear to me that it is how it usually works. And so November 3rd will be an important day, but November 4th will be an important day too. And November 5th and 6th and February 19th and whatever it is, because these systems are huge and sprawling and powerful, and you have to push them constantly and at every turn.
But what's amazing to me, Bill, is that I really started down this path of working on the environment back in 2008, when this area right here, this extraordinary area which provides water for 16 million people, here we are in the upper Delaware River Basin in Pennsylvania, a place that stopped fracking in its tracks through community organizing. That was a moment where, since then, I can think of so many incredible innovations that the environmental movement has created, right? 100% renewable energy plans from Stanford and other places, huge upswing in technology for wind and for solar, Fridays for Future, Greta Thunberg, this incredible youth movement that has just exploded all over the planet with such enthusiasm and such incredible sort of badassery and that infectious love that only the teenagers can exude, and they're focused on climate change. The divestment movement, which has now racked up trillions of dollars in commitments. The anti-fracking movement, which has banned fracking in the majority of countries in Europe, a lot of places in the United States. So much so, the Paris Accords. I mean, all in the last 10 years. And that is a remarkable thing to see a new birth of and to be witness to that history. And I think you know where this is going. I have to ask you just to not spend a lot of time on this, but we did have a bit of a setback in the last couple of weeks, which happened to attack our progress. And you particularly, which I found particularly offensive, in this Michael Moore documentary, which we have both written extensively about, and there have been over 25 different.
Because the thing has been so incredibly debunked from every corner.
Right.
I mean, I think it's more like 100 different essays, articles, movies, podcasts, whatever. I mean, just every possible scientist saying, no, there's this, every premise of this thing is completely untrue, completely outdated, cherry picked, whatever. I've gotten to, answer the parts about me. My guess is, I don't know. I mean, it definitely will do some damage, for a while, but it may also produce some more unity too, as people just say, you know what, that's nonsense, and we don't have time or space for this kind of attempt at division. The people who've loved it, of course, have been the right-wing climate deniers, the Heartland Institute.
Breitbart.
All those guys are like, oh yeah, go whatever.
I never thought I would see the natural gas industry promoting a Michael Moore movie, but this is the weirdness of 2020.
I got to say, I've reached the point where I'm feeling a tiny bit sorry almost for Michael Moore, because clearly he didn't know what he was talking about, and you can't, I mean, it's like, dude, it's science, it doesn't work to just blunder in. But what are you going to say? I mean, there are always going to be fights like this, but I think the trend is headed in the right direction. I mean, the last week, the most effective debunking of the whole idea that like renewable energy doesn't work, came last week when researchers said that for the last 40 days, the US has produced more power from renewable energy than from coal. So, clearly something's working, But
turns out the wind and the sun is better than burning rocks.
But it must be said, we don't know if we can make it work fast enough. We just had the hottest month in the planet's history. It's scary, scares the hell out of me, the whole thing. I know that 75 years from now, we're going to run the planet on sun and wind because it's cheap. But on current trajectories, it'll be a broken world that we're running on sun and wind. So the planet's outside its comfort zone. We need to get outside ours. For the moment, we have to stay in our house, just like you're doing here. But that doesn't mean we can't be working hard to do what needs to be done. And I'm really grateful to you for continuing to do that, and to everybody else, on we go.
Thanks, Bill. That's I think we have to end it there for the moment. But as always, it's a huge a learning event for me to hear what you have to say, and I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for being our inaugural guest on the new show on TYT.
Such congratulations. Take care, friend.
Wow. Always such an incredible experience to talk with Bill McKibben, a writer, and his voice is unmistakable when he writes, but when he speaks, he has a way of breaking things down simply, clearly, scientifically, matter-of-factly, that I always appreciate. And Bill also, I have to say, has always put others in front of him instead of being the guy who's like, oh, look at me, look at me, look at me. That's one thing about Bill McKibben, which is rather extraordinary. And we're all really grateful to his leadership over the years and to his continuing role leading our aspects of this movement that we need his voice so desperately in our movement spaces. So thanks, Bill. Okay, you're watching Staying Home with Josh Fox, your revolutionary guide to the Green New Deal on TYT. My next guest is kind of the musical director of this program in a way. And if we are ever to leave the house, we have a big, New Orleans jazz version of this show that we would love to premiere at some point in the future. Mr. Don Vappy, the legend, banjo player, guitar player, songwriter, singer. What can I say about Don? He's been a great friend of mine. He's on every Friday night with us with the song of the week. But I thought he would be the perfect first musical guest. How you doing, Don?
I'm good, Josh. How are you?
It's like the same as it was yesterday, kind of.
Yeah.
But that's good because I've had a few friends who said they have coronavirus, and I'm very, very deeply concerned about them. But so far, they seem like they're doing all right. And it's this one of the hardest questions to answer. How are you? Isn't it?
It's a very weird kind of disease because a good friend of mine, Wes Anderson, who y'all might know him as Warm Daddy, played with Wynton Marsalis for decades. He had the virus, and he has some health issues, and I was really afraid. He'd gone through two strokes already, and
Whoa.
But he survived. So, there's a lot we don't know, man.
There's a lot we don't know.
It's a dangerous thing.
So you're going to play your own tunes. You're going to play things that are public domain. What do you got to start us off for this evening?
Well, I thought St. James Infirmary might be a good song to play.
It's one of my favorites.
It's a great tune, and especially Danny Barker used to put his mark on it. So I'll try to channel the great Danny in my own way here. So, shall I?
Please go right ahead.
All righty. Well, it was down old Joe's barroom, down on the corner by the square, where we used to play 5 days a week before we got shut up in the house. Drinks were being served as usual, and a goodly crowd was there. Then up stepped old Joe McKenzie. You knew all his folks. Y'all remember him. He used to run the bakery. His eyes were bloodshot red, kind of like somebody else I was just looking at. He ordered a drink from the bar, then he turned around. He turned around, and these were the words he said. He said, I went down to St. James Infirmary the first time. Saw my baby there. She was stretched out on this long, long white table. So cold, so still, so bad. At least I could go there, I said, Lord, let her go. God bless her, for the devil gonna catch her wherever she may be. She could search the whole wide world over and never ever find a good attitude, nice looking, great banjo playing man like me. Now when I die, I want you to bury me in my box-back coat and my Stetson hat. Don't forget my Saint sticker on the side. Put a $20 gold piece on my watch chain. So all the fellas who know I died standing time. Now, that's the end of my story. What you mean by time? Lord knows I've paid my dues every year on time. Hey, bartender, send me a drink, a double Glenmorangie on the rocks. Make it neat, because I got these St. James Infirmary blues. Got to end on a happy chord, man. Sad song.
You're watching Staying Home with Josh Fox, your revolutionary guide to the Green New Deal. Don Vappy is my first musical guest. If you're watching on TYT, that's the end of our show. Thank you for being with us. Stay home and stay safe. If you're watching on any of my platforms, Josh Fox or Gasland, stick with us. We're going to do another song with Mr. Vappy as a bonus feature. Thank you so much for being with us tonight. Stay home, stay safe. Man, that song, it just destroys me every time, Don.
Oh, I'm sorry, man.
No, what? The way you just did that, you had me in tears and you had me laughing at the same time.
Well,
this is all part of the bonus, by the way. We're here. Man, I just think that, I don't know. I think it's because my good friend Vanessa Blade died this year. She was a young woman. She was 34. She had 2 kids. Her kids went with her. It hits me like a ton of bricks. And but this is what people are going through right now in this moment of this coronavirus. And we are, it's such a strange moment because we're challenged to dream the future as we're in a nightmare. And that's what that song is like. It's like, it's got sass, it's got laughs, it's got life, it's got drinks, it's got gambling, it's got booze, and it's got the death of it all right there.
As you all know, in these tough times, we're doing an audience fundraising drive to keep Young Turks strong and healthy and for us to press on. tyt.com/go is how you can contribute. I want to read some of the names of the folks who have so far. We love every single one of you. Frank Dolce gave $5, love it. Nabil Amareddin gave $1. Alexia Bell gave $65. Brian Lopez $50. Clara Tolich $5. Attila DeBag $3. Kimberly Bridges $3. Brian Houlihan $50. Ellen Craig $100. Ross Tannenbaum gave $15 and gave a little story that I want to share with you guys. But every dollar matters, guys. We appreciate the big donations so much, but we also appreciate even as low as $1 donation. If that's what you have, we love you for it. And thank you for being part of this progressive message and getting it out. So Ross talks about how he grew up in 1958 in Hollywood, and he went and lived through the civil rights era and MLK and all those things, and was super excited at the time. Afterwards, obviously there was a lull, but in 2016 he got re-energized with Bernie Sanders and that movement. He even caucused for him in Las Vegas this time around. And but he is upset that Bernie stayed within the Democratic Party. He thought that he should have led a third party, and it's okay to have these different points of view. And he says, now we need a new progressive leader, and Cenk, that should be you. Well, that's very flattering, and I appreciate it. And in fact, on May 5th, we're going to have a special where I'm going to announce certain dramatic things. Ooh, okay, so stay tuned for that. But he ended by saying, now I watch TYT daily and will continue to donate during the fundraiser. And after that, I will become a member as long as I can afford to. Keep fighting the good fight. Stay safe. Stay salty. I love it. Thank you so much, Ross, and all of you. Without you, we can't do the show. We're Young Turks together. TYT.com/go.
Patience. It's a virtue. They think you can put me in a box. But you can't stifle a revolution. Cenk Uygur, you started something, an idea. The truth and honesty matter above all else. And the people love you for it. And for a while, so did I. We could have stood united, a political force of reckoning upon our foes, the hypocrites, the phonies, the unjust. But you put me in this box.
Cenk! No!
You began without me. You began without me. But God as my witness, I will be the one to finish it.
They did 100 squats a day for 30 days straight. I was like, how hard can that be? That doesn't sound very hard. So I'm gonna try to do this for 30 days and see if there's any difference in my physique.
3 weeks later.
Steve, how is your exercise regimen coming along with your squats?
I did 100, 100, 100, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0.
You're pacing
0
yourself.
Yeah.
Right.
It is wrong to deny any of your fellow Americans the right to vote in this country.
Look, I tell you guys, most important thing is voting in primaries. Primaries, primaries, primaries.
I hope every American will vote for the candidate and party of his choice, but vote.
We cannot continue to complain about corruption and complain about what's happening in this country and continue to vote for it.
Let's get it right this time. It could be a moment of redemption for what happened in 2016. We're very honest that we're progressives. We call the Young Turks home of progressives, and we support progressive candidates.
There has been this reemergence of political activism, especially among young people.
This weekend was the second Women's March, both across the U.S. and across the world. So these people are not simply marching, they're not simply talking, they're also running for office. And when they do run, they're going to make a difference.
Joe Crowley is congressman from New York. He's very powerful. Why? He raised a lot of money. But there's someone finally challenging him.
We need to have representation that advocates as fiercely for working class people as possible from this seat.
If candidates like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez even get a little bit of media attention outside of what the Young Turks does, they have an excellent chance of winning. She's gonna win. She's gonna win.
68% reporting.
The majority of Americans want Medicare for all. So I don't care what you and your corporate cronies want. What I care about is what the American people want.
We believe in total change. Everything runs on donor money. And that is what we will fight, and that is exactly why they don't like us.
We're having fun, it's election night!
Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez has defeated Joe Crowley.
Here we go again!
Ladies and gentlemen, we got him.
Down goes Crowley! Down goes Crowley! Down goes Manafort! Down goes Cohen! Populist left wing with a gigantic victory in Mexico.
Senator Gillibrand, you have made a pledge to no longer accept corporate PAC money.
Women came out in record numbers in the primaries. They said, you'll be lucky to get one candidate. We now have 12 that have won their primaries. Bezos and Amazon announcing that they are going to go to a 15-hour minimum wage.
We're making progress. Let's keep going.
Many of these women made history.
The biggest victories, all women of color. Rashida Tlaib and Ilhan Omar, Sharice Davids and Deb Haaland. For a long time, we have not had progressives in power. It's going to be something to behold.
Welcome to Happy Hour, everybody. After a week of soul-crushing news, we break out the good stuff. Good news, good videos, good people, and, of course, drink good alcohol. That's the worst thing I've ever had.
This is the best show.
Full disclosure, we did do a shot right before the show began. It says, let's flamingo.
Flamingo.
The reason you had trouble with that word is it's not a word. Okay. This is the one of everything.
I've got a rash. Could I just put it on that to see if it'll take it off?
What did you used to think this was?
Bull piss.
Drink it, swallow it,
No.
spit it. Oh, that's needed after a day like this. Cheers to Brett Ehrlich. Climax. Uranus smells like farts. Because of course it does. This is the worst sketch ever of a perp. But guess what, ladies and gentlemen? They found the guy! This is Sophie's super happy dog story of the week.
This dog is so precious and deserves the world. I'm just not drinking that beer.
Here's my dog. This is Onyx.
Yeah, I would just say that he's exotic because he's not your traditional dog. Still 12 out of 10 because they're all good.
Well, if that made you happy, just wait till you see the best thing ever of the week. There is a woman who moves like a horse.
Why do I want to go home and like try this?
We're actually going to show you the running butthole challenge right now. What's happening? No, that's just wrong. Every way. And we'll see you next time.
Hey, Dave. As you can probably see, Skype froze. Frozen crashed.
You know, I'm watching that documentary on the Vietnam War, and there was a TV journalist in the middle of some tiny little village in Vietnam doing live TV as the soldiers were burning the Vietnamese huts, and it didn't crash. And that was 1965, and he was in Vietnam.
All right, welcome to the conversation on the TYT Network. Now we're going to talk to someone that you guys might be familiar with. It's Josh Fox, of course, the director of the Oscar-nominated Gasland. Also did Gasland 2, also did How to Let Go of the World and Love All the Things Climate Can't Change. Also the host of Staying Home with Josh Fox, which some of you just saw live. There he's got great guests like he just did today, Bill McKibben, Michael Mann, etc. Also a man having a little bit of a beef with Michael Moore. That's a fun story, although not really that fun, that we'll get into in a second. But Josh, thanks for joining us. And for folks who didn't see it, tell us what Staying at Home with Josh Fox is.
Hey, Cenk, thanks so much. It's great to be here. It's great to be on the Young Turks. Staying Home with Josh Fox. It's our new program. It's called Staying Home with Josh Fox, Your Revolutionary Guide to the Green New Deal. And it started as a series of talks about the Green New Deal that I was doing for DSA in New Orleans with New Orleans for Bernie. And then I proposed doing this spanning tour of Pennsylvania and New York, talking about climate change, talking about the Green New Deal. And, obviously couldn't do that. So I started to do the program at home. This is my theater, which is a converted garage in Northeast Pennsylvania, where we're sheltering in place. And Staying Home with Josh Fox essentially started as a series of conversations with climate experts and figures from the world of culture. So I know a lot of people who are activists, political folks, climate scientists, anti-fracking campaigners, journalists, and I know a hell of a lot of musicians and artists and writers and filmmakers. So I made a program where the first half is really about a political conversation, and the second half is about a more artistic dialogue, a more spiritual dialogue, a dialogue about how we're coping on the internal front with all of this huge changes. But the basic premise of the show is we must have the Green New Deal as a way to, as a cure and as a prescription out of this moment of the coronavirus. Because the fossil fuel industry is actually a cofactor in the death rate of the coronavirus. So we talk a lot about how the Green New Deal is such an important part of our response to the coronavirus. And the Green New Deal is this, it's a piece of legislation, it's a resolution, but it's also this fascinating world-changing philosophy. So the subject, it can get really deep, and it's not limiting at all to talk about different aspects of it on different nights, you know what I mean?
So there's so much to go over there. When you say it's a cofactor for coronavirus, what do you mean by that?
Well, okay, so the fossil fuel industry all on its own, before the coronavirus, is a global pandemic. The fossil fuel industry's pollution kills 5 to 7 million people every year, just in air pollution. That gives you cancer, it gives you lung disease, it gives you heart problems, and a whole host of other things, right? That costs us $30 trillion a year in healthcare costs. So to switch from fossil fuels to renewable energy would save us $30 trillion a year, which would pay for the transition in about a year and a half. But those things, if you don't die from them, lung disease, heart disease, cancer, if you have a chronic condition, that makes you much more susceptible to having a bad experience or even death with coronavirus because those things increase your chances of not surviving the coronavirus. So when we say people died of coronavirus, we also have to look into account the pollution that's there. All of those things are part of the death rate. Additionally, if you live in a polluted area, you actually have a greater chance of getting the coronavirus because your lungs and your immune system are weakened. So at every stage along the game, the fossil fuel industry is a factor here. The good news is that the Green New Deal is actually the cure for the fossil fuel pandemic. We don't have a cure for coronavirus yet, but we have a cure for the other part.
Yeah, friends of mine are sending me pictures from all over the country in the cities that they live in, remarking at how clean the air is, and they can't believe how clean it is. That's how it would normally be if we didn't have so much pollution from the cars, because obviously people aren't driving anywhere near as much as they used to pre-coronavirus. So you could almost, basically, I'm telling you, you could see it with your own eyes, let alone things that you can't see. But Josh, this is the hardest question of all. How do you maintain hope that we can get the Green New Deal passed? I mean, did a segment recently about a 5-year plan for progressives to take over, and I believe that with all my heart, and I think there's good evidence for that. But in the meanwhile, I mean, right now the Trump administration is considering subsidies for oil companies because poor oil companies aren't doing well enough in this. And it doesn't look like we have any prayer of being able to pass this legislation in this, not only with the Republican Party as it is, but with the Democratic Party as it is.
Well, in 2016, I served on the platform committee with Bill McKibben. We talked a little bit about this in the episode today. And we were able to gather and gain enormous concessions from that Clinton campaign, right? We got passed in the platform, basically a ban on frack gas power plants and fossil fuel infrastructure. We got a 100-day summit on climate action to be conducted within 100 days of the Clinton administration. And none of those things came to pass because Hillary Clinton lost. First thing we have to do is we do have to elect somebody other than Donald Trump, right? So we have to vote for the candidate that we want to protest the most. Because what's going to happen is we'll go out there, and if it's Joe Biden who is the nominee, the next day after Joe Biden takes office, we as the movement take the power that we've earned, right? Because we have spent all of this time over the last 10 years gaining and amassing a huge amount of power. And I, for one, will not give that power away. I'm talking about the climate movement, right? Trillions of dollars divested. Fridays for Future, these kids all over the place going bonkers. Extinction Rebellion, mass direct action. We have renewable energy plans, 100% renewable energy plans, bans on fracking. Huge amounts of progress in the environmental movement that we're not going to give up, right? So the problem with Trump is you can't push him. And you can't forward that dialogue in any way because it's never a dialogue. It's just monologue. And I think that the difference there is obviously that we want to have an administration that we believe that we can push, that will be susceptible to our pressure, and that the power that we have, we don't just lose it. And so, look, I think we can pass parts of it, and I think we have champions like Bernie Sanders, like AOC, like Rashida Tlaib and others, and Ilhan Omar. And I think that we have to do everything we possibly can to get more of those voices into the House and into the Senate. But listen, this is always about movement, right? We are the movement. We don't lose. This election is about strategy, but we're the movement. We've had enormous gains. And so I have faith that if we continue to do what we've been doing, we'll have some degree of success. But we talk about this on the program every single night. Every single night, that's what we're talking about.
Yeah, no. And that is hopeful. That's a great answer. So a couple of quick questions here then. Speaking of one of those champions, we saw him in the picture that we put up about the Green New Deal just a second ago. That's Ed Markey. He is the sponsor of Green New Deal in the Senate. And now the corporate Democrats have decided that they're going to primary him with Joseph Kennedy. What can folks do to make sure Ed Markey wins? And am I missing
tons of these races?
Is he really important in the Senate?
We practically have a third party in America right now, and that is the candidates that have been endorsed by our revolution. People like Doyle Canning in Oregon, people like Andrew Romanoff running against Hickenlooper in a primary in Colorado, people like you said, Ed Markey, who is the incumbent but is facing an insurgent challenge from the establishment. So we have that. We absolutely have to go all the way out, right? Because these are now national races. Okay, they're not just local. They're not just about Massachusetts or Colorado or Oregon. These are places that we have to start to focus. And one of the great guides to that has been the Our Revolution organization, which has endorsed progressive candidates with that progressive seal of approval. And I think that that's one of the things that we can look to as how do we move forward. But I think, look, the revolution, the political revolution is not out of this election, right? We may not have Bernie at the top of the ticket, but we have so many other people who are carrying those values forward, right?
Yeah. So I mentioned the Michael Moore movie, so I wanted to just touch on it for a minute. Planet of the Humans came out. It was deeply controversial, went after a lot of the leaders of the movement. And I know you've talked about it before and staying with Josh Fox, and you'll probably talk about it again. But real quick, what do you think was the core of the problem there? What did they do wrong?
Well, the premise of the film is wrong. The premise of the film is renewable energy doesn't work or is dependent on fossil fuels. This is patently absurd. Obviously, if you take into account the life cycle of a wind plant or a solar plant, there's a tiny fraction of the carbon emissions that are coming from those types of forms of energy. In fact, renewable energy just beat coal in terms of power generation in the United States in the last month. So renewable energy works. It's here to stay. It is a cornerstone of the Green New Deal. Michael Moore and his friend Jeff Gibbs have been their heads buried in the sand apparently for at least 12 or 15 years. And they've come out with a movie with dated information, with all sorts of deceitful things, the fossil fuel industry talking points. It is mind-numbing. It is shocking. It is confusing. And it has been roundly attacked and rebutted and debunked and all the things. There's over, I think, 100 different scientific rebuttals to this movie saying this is nonsense. So I wrote one in The Nation, and we talk about it a bit on the program. But Michael Moore should be embarrassed. We've asked for a retraction, not censorship, not censoring the movie. We've asked that the filmmakers themselves understand that they really messed up and they pulled the movie back. They're not doing that. They're digging in their heels. It's kind of a disaster, but for them more than us. We know the truth. The truth is the climate movement is strong. The truth is the anti-fracking movement is strong. And the truth is that we have that power, renewable energy power and political power.
All right, everybody, 4:30 p.m. Eastern every day now on tyt.com/live, also on youtube.com/tyt. They're both the same stream. Staying Home with Josh Fox. It's now the beginning of our programming every day. So, Josh, great to have you on. Always appreciate it, brother.
So excited. Thanks for having the show, and thanks for having me on tonight.
Absolutely.
Damn it, they failed us. And if you're not angry about that, Michael, and any of you out there, then you're damn wrong, because you should be angry. Young Turks.
It was genuine. He was mad.
Cenk Uygur, known online as one of the Young Turks, isn't afraid to throw some punches.
3, 2, 1, fade up.
Cenk the Turk Uygur.
What kind of TV station is this? The whole point is for me to yell and scream and tell you what I think.
It was right out of like Wayne's World.
This guy on this little rinky-dink website is speaking truth to power.
We've been averaging 600,000 views a day, beating most of the cable shows in America.
We're the largest online news show in the world. We're celebrating our 1 billionth view.
Television, we're coming.
More politics ahead with Cenk Uygur.
He knew that the MSNBC opportunity was an experiment.
And Phil and host beat CNN and headline news combined. At some point, they want to give me a show.
Every single year, that comes out of our paycheck. We put it in, and you're saying we were suckers.
When you, as a host, tells someone you're interviewing to shut up, that's going to raise a red flag.
That guy needed a tall glass of shut-up juice.
If President Obama's doing the wrong thing, I'm not going to tell you that he's doing the right thing so I can, quote, support him.
He says to me, "You won't believe the meeting that I just had."
The head of MSNBC talked to me.
They want him off the air.
Cenk took an incredible risk.
We're supposed to challenge the government. That's the role of the media. The Democrats and the Republicans are here to screw you. And who on the air is saying it?
I wouldn't have done what he did.
That if I'm going to be a talk show host, I should be the biggest talk show host in the country. I don't think anyone else does it better. I don't think anyone's even close.
Before you know it, I'll be back on your TV doing a national show. I guarantee it.
Cenk Uygur, Anna Kasparian with you guys, ready for a rock and roll show.
We've never played instruments before, but we're going to try for the first time right now.
My God, if Jesus came back, how much would the Republicans hate him? Jesus would come back and be like, no, I'm done with all the banks. And he said, now you have to give away all of your possessions to the poor. Steve King would be like, oh, Weezy, they're coming to get me. It's not about fighting amongst each other. It's about making sure we correct the political system so our government works for us and our representatives actually represent us. And unfortunately, not a lot of the rest of the media even understands that concept, but we do here.
You can't be pro-life and pro the death penalty.
They're afraid to do it because they're stuck in this, this lie. The Republicans are great with money in the economy, and then they don't spend all your money and take it from you. It's exactly what they do. Just say it.
Okay, we're about to have some fun on the show. Strap on. That's not a thing. She's gonna fall one of these days. One of these days she's gonna fall.
Okay. All right, we gotta do the story. this country is not run by the people for the people. It's run by corporations. It's run by weapons manufacturers. It's run by private military contractors.
We've been telling you that people care about policy, and people on TV, they're like, no, everybody just cares about gloss and shine and whether you're rolling up your sleeves well. But what's more impressive is policy, and that you should make equal note of that, and you most certainly have not.
All right, we're back on the conversation on the TYT network. A lot of folks are asking, should I refinance these days in the middle of coronavirus because of interest rates? And specifically, should I refinance my student loans? We've got a guest on for you guys who is saying, no, don't do it, even though you might use this company to do it. So it's kind of an interesting situation. David Klein is the CEO and co-founder of Common Bond. They're one of the first online student loan lenders. David, welcome to TYT.
Thanks, Cenk. Good to be here.
All right, good to have you. I want to ask what Common Bond is in a second, but first, why not? Why not refinance your student loan now?
Sure. So it's a little more nuanced than that. We're advising people who hold a federal student loan that itself is held by the federal government. It makes sense to take advantage of the federal relief that's out there, which basically takes the payment to zero, takes interest rate to zero through September 30th. And what we're telling folks is, hey, take advantage of that and, be at the ready to start paying again come October 1st. And to the extent you want to transition from federal relief to refi relief on October 1st, then we have a platform that can really help you. And in fact, we've historically helped people save a lot of money on a monthly basis and over time by getting them into a lower interest rate loan, lower relative to what they're into the federal government. So if you're holding a federal loan that's held by the federal government, we're saying you might want to sit tight for a little bit, take advantage of relief. If, however, you have a federal loan that's not held by the federal government, and that's about 20% of loans, federal loans out there, generally loans that were originated before July 1st, 2010. Or if you have a private loan from a private bank or a private lender, it still very well could make a lot of sense to refinance your debt, especially with interest rates that are at historic lows.
What is the federal government saying now? Is it that you don't have to pay any interest on those student debts until October, you said?
Until October 1st, that's right.
Okay, got you. So obviously you don't want to refinance from 0%. That's a pretty good rate to get.
Exactly.
Yeah. And so do you have to make payments, though? It could be that your interest is 0% and you still have to make principal, or is that you don't have to make payments until October 1st?
It's both. So interest goes down to 0% and you don't need to make payments. The language says through September 30th. Now, what's interesting is that if people are able or so wish to continue paying their monthly payment every month, they can do so. And what's interesting about this time through September 30th is that every dollar that goes towards your student loan payment will go 100% towards principal. And so if you're able, this could be an opportunity to pay down your student debt faster, since 100% of everything that goes to pay down your student loan during this period through September 30th will go 100% towards principal.
And for those who choose not to pay it now, obviously because of economic hardship, do they add those months to the end of your, basically your loan?
Yes. So folks will and still owe the government the entirety of the principal balance that they received. But there is this moratorium on payment to help those who could benefit from some cash relief.
And so how about the private loans? Is there any break on the private loans, or nope, you got to make the payments? Yes, interest rates, if you refinance, are lower, but is there any relief there in any of the laws, or no?
There's something called forbearance, and forbearance essentially is a fancy word for payment pause. It's an opportunity for somebody who demonstrates economic hardship, whether because of COVID or any other reason, that enables them to pause their payments for X number of months at a time.
And is that just for student loans, or can people do forbearance on other things?
Generally, there's forbearance for other lending products as well. Certainly the case for student loans. And it's something that we've done for our borrowers since the very beginning. In fact, our standard forbearance program, from what we understand, is the longest amount of time, the most protection that exists in the industry.
How about mortgages? Are banks offering any forbearance or any accommodation for mortgages?
There is the notion of mortgage forbearance. Yes, that exists.
Okay. Do you have a rough sense of how many of the banks are letting folks do that?
Generally speaking, that should be a relatively common opportunity for people with mortgages to get. Generally, the rules are very specific to each lender, to each servicer. And so what we say is, certainly in our industry, call your lender, call your servicer is the more appropriate and accurate way to say it. Call your servicer, ask them what your options are around forbearance. You should qualify for that forbearance. But of course, every servicer has their own set of criteria.
A lot of folks don't know that that's possible. My wife didn't even know that was possible. And so it's really important to get that word out. It doesn't mean that it's guaranteed or that it's definitely going to apply to you, but it's definitely worth asking.
For sure.
Yeah. So what does Common Bond do exactly?
Sure. So at Common Bond, we like to say, if you have a student loan, we can help. And we do that in 4 distinct ways. We have a platform we call Money Mentor Platform. It is human-powered, AI-assisted financial guidance, mostly for 17 and 18-year-olds, folks who are thinking about going to college, how to pay for college. We help people collect and secure free money like scholarships and grants. If they need financing, we have a low-cost financing option. So that's the first way we help people. The second way we help people is with in-school financing. So there are a lot of students who, in order to go to school, need financing, need loans. In order to do that, we provide low-cost loans for students to go to school. The third way we do that is through refinance, something you mentioned before. So this is for a student who has graduated either an undergrad or a graduate program. They graduated with student debt, and they're looking to refinance that debt, consolidate it in one loan product at a lower interest rate, save money over time. That's what we do, and that's actually our largest business. And then our fourth business is for that student who graduated with student debt who's now gainfully employed. We have an enterprise business whereby we provide student loan benefits to employers that they in turn provide employees as a perk. And so an example of that is something we call student loan contribution. That's where we've built technology that enables an employer to contribute, say, $100 a month to their employees' student debt. People are calling it kind of the 401k of student loans.
What allows you to charge a lower interest rate than the rest of the market?
Sure. So the rest of the market is either the federal government or private banks. The federal government basically charges one rate to everybody. It's a little more complicated than that, but it's essentially one rate to everybody. There's no underwriting. So the government doesn't take into consideration ability to pay or willingness to repay a loan. They basically say, if you can prove you are enrolled at an institution, we, the federal government, will give you up to the total cost of attendance at that institution. What we do is we underwrite. So we take into consideration a number of factors. We're underwriting credit. We're looking at somebody's ability to repay and somebody's willingness to repay over time. And so because we do that, we're able to charge a lower rate than than the one rate, the one size fits all rate that the federal government charges. That's with respect to the federal government. With respect to private banks, frankly, we're branchless. We're 100% digital, so we don't have that cost in our cost basis, and so we're generally okay taking, frankly, less profit per loan than a big giant bank is, and so we're able to provide a rate that is a bit lower than the average rate charged by a lot of these big institutional private lenders.
Are there going to be retail banks in the future, or are they eventually going to go away because it's really easy to do it online? And why would you have all that expense of those retail banks?
Yeah, it's a question that's been asked for a while, especially with the advent of fintech. That being said, if you talk to a lot of the executives at many of the banks, I think you'll find I was going to say two camps, but there's really one primary camp. There's just gradations. The one primary camp is branches matter, but where there's gradation is how many branches you actually need, what the concentration of branches actually is. And there you run the gamut.
David Klein from Common Bond, and as he just told you guys, make sure you're looking into your options. This is a unique moment in time, and you might have more options than you realize. So thank you for joining us on the Young Turks. We appreciate it.
Thanks a lot.
1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3.
My first record came out and hit, and did you know that Elvis Presley and Pat Boone sold more of Tutti Frutti than I did? And I wrote it and sung it.
Did that bother you?
No, it didn't. It made me feel good. They opened the door that was locked and I couldn't get in. And I wrote it. Could I say something? I am the king of rock and roll, the undisputed king, and can't nothing take my throne. I'm the creator, the originator, the emancipator. I am the one. I am the king of rock and roll. Ow, ow, holy Magadan!
All right, welcome to the Young Turks. Cenk Uygur and a Kasparian with you guys. Big day ahead. As we're doing pretty much every day during this coronavirus lockdown, quarantine, social distancing situation, we are checking in to see how our audience funding drive is going, because we also need to keep TYT healthy. I think we were trying to get to 95,000 by the end of Friday's show, something along those lines, and I think we hit it but forgot to tell you guys. And then 100,000 by the end of the weekend. But come on, is that really going to happen? So let's take a look. TYT.com/go. 100,146. So many people have no idea what I'm doing when I do those weird
sound effects.
Things. Yeah, sound effects. Okay. Anyways, 105. TYT.com/go. We do need to raise about 200 a month to keep sustainable and healthy, and we appreciate every single dollar given by you guys, and we celebrate it on air quite often. All right, lots of stories to get to. Anna, what do you got?
All right. Well, over the weekend, we learned new revelations regarding the Trump administration and its ridiculous decision to cut critical funding toward coronavirus research. Now, unfortunately, the decision was prompted by conspiracy theories on Fox News, and we'll get to that in just a second. But we've learned more information through a 60 Minutes interview with Peter Daszak. Now, Peter Daszak is an American scientist, and he's studying coronavirus in collaboration with the Wuhan laboratory that has been, of course, criticized for withholding numbers initially regarding the outbreak, but it's still important to research alongside these scientists in China in order to get a firm grasp of where the coronavirus specifically came from, how it's spreading, and what we can do to effectively mitigate the impact. So Peter Daszak, that's the scientist, is actually a very credible individual. In fact, back in 2000, he was quoted as saying, "What worries me the most is we are going to miss the next emerging disease, that we're suddenly going to find a SARS virus that moves from one part of the planet to another, wiping out people as it moves along." Now, CBS News reports that Daszak's funding from the NIH, the U.S. National Institutes of Health, was killed 2 weeks ago by a political disinformation campaign targeting China's Wuhan Institute. He was quoted as saying, "Our strategy is to go to the wildlife source, find out where the viruses are, and try to shift behaviors like hunting and killing wildlife that could lead to the next outbreak. We also get the information into vaccine and drug developers so they can design better drugs." So again, his research is incredibly important. And I should also note, he is not with the NIH. He is a scientist who founded an organization known as EcoHealth. The NIH was given a grant. He was given a grant in order to work alongside these researchers and scientists in Wuhan in order to, again, get the information that we desperately need in order to mitigate the spread of this virus. Now, when it comes to the disinformation campaign that he's talking about, he's specifically referring to the types of comments that Republican lawmakers like Representative Gates made when they went on Fox News. We have a snippet of that. This was from April 14th on Tucker Carlson's show. Take a look.
Something remarkable and upsetting. The work in that lab, including its research into disease-carrying bats, was funded in part by U.S. taxpayers through the National Institutes of Health. Hard to believe that's true, but it is. Congressman, that's one of those stories that if you had said that out loud a week ago, I think even I might have dismissed you as insane, but it's true. How did this happen?
Yeah, I'm against funding Chinese research in our country, but I'm sure against funding it in China. The NIH gives this $3.7 million grant to the Wuhan Institute of Virology. They then advertise that they need coronavirus researchers. Following that, coronavirus erupts in Wuhan. And then what's really troubling to me is that either conspicuously or miraculously, the Wuhan Institute of Virology is able to sequence the virus on January 2nd, but China doesn't admit to the virus existing to January 9th, and then the Wuhan Institute of Virology doesn't release this important scientific information to the world until January 12th. So at best, Americans are funding people who are lying to us, and at worst, we're funding people who we knew had problems handling pathogens, who then birthed a monster virus onto the world.
By the way,
so there you have it. There was more of what Gates had to say, but Cenk, I mean, jump in here, because some might argue, well, you know, the Chinese government, these scientists in China weren't being as forthcoming as they could have been in the beginning. Does it really make sense to do research with them into this virus? I mean, I disagree with that statement, but I wanted to get your thoughts.
Okay, there's definitely a couple of layers here. First of all, Matt Gaetz says, and then miraculously, they're the ones first ones to sequence it. That's not at all miraculous, because they were the ones studying different kinds of coronaviruses, and they're the ones, along with the scientists that is from America, the one that got the funding cut off, and in the quote that Anna read you a little while ago, said back in 2003, 17 years ago, there will be a worldwide pandemic. It will jump from place to place, and we're trying to study it. So our answer isn't, holy cow, these guys were on top of it. They've been studying this for decades. And when I say these guys, I mean the scientists. So the American scientists involved here, NIH for doing the grant, and the Chinese scientists in the lab in Wuhan as well. Instead of saying, oh my God, they've been studying this for decades, that was so prescient of them. And here, unfortunately, something happened exactly as they warned us about. Maybe we should, fund them more, because they apparently know what they're doing. We go in the opposite direction. Oh, how did they know? What were they doing? They were doing science. And if you think like, well, Cenk, wait a minute, that is a bit of a coincidence. It comes from Wuhan, and there's a lab in Wuhan that studies this stuff. Okay, I hear you. If that was part of a plot, why didn't they do it 17 years ago? So they've been studying this for all of this time, because they know that it jumps from wild animals, and there are rural areas, both there and in other places, where people hunt, and then they wind up getting a disease from an animal that you wouldn't necessarily normally eat. Bats is the number one thing that this American scientist was studying. It looks like it jumped from bats. By the way, it's not an accident or a coincidence that he's studying bats, because a lot of the coronaviruses jump from bats. They already know that. You know why? Because they're scientists. They're not idiot pundits like Tucker Carlson and idiot conspiracy theorists like Matt Gaetz, who wind up becoming United States congressman.
Right, exactly. And I also think it's important to understand the mindset of the executive branch as they were deciding to fund this research, and how dramatically their perspective changed just based on the conspiracy theories that you hear on, these dishonest outlets like Fox News. So as CBS News clearly states, the grant was to Peter Daszak's U.S.-based EcoHealth Alliance for Disease Prevention. it does throughout the world, his work was considered so important that last year the grant was reauthorized and increased by the Trump administration. So clearly the Trump administration had a great deal of trust in Peter Daszak's research and work. And then all of a sudden, after you hear these ridiculous conspiracy theories by conservatives on Fox News, they take that grant money away. And Daszak was quoted as saying, I can't just show up to China and say, hi, I want to work on your viruses. I have to do this through the correct channels. So what we do is we talk to NIH and they approve the people we can work with in China. And that happened. And our collaboration with Wuhan was pre-approved by NIH. And so what did the Trump administration say when it came to revoking that incredibly important funding? Daszak says they said it was canceled for convenience and it doesn't fit within the scope of NIH's priorities right now. How is this not a priority right now? And then he said, I mean, this grant received an incredibly high priority score. It was in the top 3% of grants they reviewed, and that's unusual. So all it takes is a misinformation campaign on Fox, and that's it. Trump's stupid administration, and I say stupid because their actions here are stupid, decide to take the resources away from this, again, important research.
The other way they could have handled this is, man, the NIH nailed it. They put this in the top 3% of their priorities before it broke out. And it turns out they were so right in prioritizing it that way. And lucky us, we've already spent a good deal of money studying this virus, which makes it easier to track. And that's why it was tracked fairly quickly. Now, unfortunately, that hasn't helped yet in coming up with a vaccine, et cetera. But it always helps scientists working on those things. And so great job by the NIH is actually a real story, and the one that could have been told if this funding wasn't pulled because of a conspiracy theory. That we could have actually given the Trump administration some credit for that. But instead, as usual, they punch themselves in the face and go, hey, that scientist that we hired that did an amazing job, oh yeah, we'll fire him and we'll blame him for working with the Chinese, and then make up a ridiculous excuse like working on coronavirus research now is not a high priority. No, but guys, even if you're MAGA, you don't believe that. No one could possibly believe that. It's the most, if I try to come out with an outlandish lie, I couldn't top working on coronavirus research is not a high priority right now.
It's just, it's absurd. And, you know, what we desperately need right now is that vaccine. And as Daszak said in his interview with 60 Minutes, that's what they were researching. That's what they were working on, in addition to, of course, really understanding the nature of this virus. And so luckily, you're right, Cenk, there are still adults in the room. We still do have some experts within our federal government who are, you know, just smart enough to do the right thing in getting answers. But what I've noticed is over and over again, you have their work either being hindered or being like thrown out the window altogether because of these like bad faith, dishonest actors like Matt Gaetz, like Tucker Carlson. And it just doesn't make any sense, especially if the only thing you care about is reopening the country. How are you going to do that if we don't have the tools necessary to do it responsibly? So, I mean, the Trump administration is working against itself again.
Trump's a well-known conspiracy theorist himself. He went on Alex Jones' show, said it was a terrific show. He was the one who pushed the birther conspiracy in the first place. It's not at all surprising that he immediately believes in outlandish theory. Like this, Mike Pompeo has talked about how this might have come out of a Wuhan lab. So we have the top echelons of the United States government pushing a wild conspiracy theory, and one that isn't just like a curiosity, but that is directly relevant to the biggest health crisis of our lifetimes. And instead of applauding and encouraging the scientists working on research to help address it, they're taking away their funding and pushing Alex Jones-like conspiracy theories instead. There's 1,000 reasons why Donald Trump should be removed from office immediately, and this is certainly among them. We cannot normalize how absurd, ridiculous, unintelligent, and conspiratorial these people are, and they lead the country.
Well, if you think that the messaging from the Trump administration conflicts and is mixed, that's certainly the case within the administration. So let's talk a little bit about the aftermath following stories of staffers testing positive for COVID-19. So while the Trump administration really downplays the severity of COVID-19 and how we unfortunately have not gotten far in improving the science and the treatments necessary to reopen the country, behind the scenes, Trump is panicking. And he's panicking because at this point, two people who he has close contact with, who the vice president has close contact with, have tested positive for coronavirus. One of those people was Donald Trump's valet, and the second person is Vice President Mike Pence's press secretary, Katie Miller. Now, what has the White House done in response to that? Well, they're scrambling to do contact tracing. Again, something that Trump has kind of downplayed when it comes to the general public. And so the Washington Post reports that the White House will receive heightened levels of daily cleaning, according to a memo. It also told employees they must quarantine for 14 days if they leave the Washington region and must report all of their travel. The memo did not suggest that employees wear masks. Now, there is a little bit of an update to this story. Apparently, now the White House is saying that everyone who works for the White House must wear a mask. Of course, Donald Trump has refused to do so himself, so I doubt that we're ever going to see him wearing one. Also, the White House had not identified who Pence spokeswoman Katie Miller contracted the virus from as of Sunday, raising concerns inside the White House about how to contain the outbreak. But Cenk, you wouldn't even know that. You would not know that if you just looked at videos of Katie Miller literally working over the weekend. Let's take a look at this video.
She is near the podium. This is Miller just yesterday, working. You can see her. She's the one not wearing a mask, speaking to reporters as she traveled with the vice president to Alexandria, Virginia. Miller is also married to Trump's senior advisor and speechwriter Stephen Miller. These are two people with not just high-profile jobs, high-contact jobs. They come into contact with a lot of people in the West Wing, from the very top on down.
So, I mean, on one hand, they're taking it seriously. On the other, you have this woman who has tested positive working without a mask on.
Okay. First of all, let me just say, I have nothing to criticize their new guidelines other than Trump not following them. I'm glad they're doing extra cleaning of the White House. They're testing people that are coming in. They're wearing masks now. That's good news, okay? On the other hand, we're in the middle of May. This has been, 2.5 months now? And you're just figuring out to wear masks, especially inside the building. I said it on the show a couple of times, and every time I saw it on the news, I kept thinking, is there any chance that they know something I don't know? Because they're all sitting inside a pretty small room with no masks on. That's asking for trouble. And then Trump had that hilarious line the other day when he's like, well, she got it out of the blue. I mean, I don't know how she got it.
When it comes to your work environment,
that's how you get a virus. You get it out of the blue. It doesn't send you a memo first. Hey, by the way, I'll be there on Wednesday, so look out for me around 12:17. No, it's a virus. You can't see it. And how did she get it? What do you mean out of the blue? We just showed you just 2 videos and pictures of her being really close to people without masks on very recently. But these guys, they don't get it. They really think they're invincible. They can't get it or something. Of course, it's airborne. Of course you could get it. But they seem genuinely surprised, oh my God, it turns out we can get it too. This thing is dangerous.
Look, my read of it, Cenk, is that they want to downplay coronavirus as much as possible publicly. Because it doesn't bode well for the Trump administration. Remember, the only thing he cares about is getting reelected. And in order for him to be as boastful about the economy as he has been, you got to reopen things, even if it's premature, even if people die as a result. But while he's downplaying it publicly, the sense that I get is that privately he's panicking, right? Because he does understand how serious this is. He does understand that if he catches this virus, even though he's the president of the United States, and I'm sure that he would get all the medical attention he needs to survive, which, you know, he should. The truth is it's a scary virus. His own economic advisor admitted that he's scared to go to work recently on cable news. So let's just quickly look at that video. This is economic advisor Kevin Hassett.
To your work environment you just described, do you wear a mask? Are you going to continue to show up for work at the White House?
You know, I've got a mask right here. And the fact is that I practice aggressive social distancing. I'll wear a mask when I feel it's necessary. It is scary to go to work. You know, I was not part of the White House in March. I think that I'd be a lot safer if I was sitting at home than I would be going to the West Wing. But, you know, it's a time when people have to step up and serve their country. But I think everybody knows that going to work, you've been in the West Wing, you know, it's a small, crowded place. It's you know, it's a little bit risky, but you have to do it because you have to serve your country.
It sounds like he's worried he has it. Anyways, so he's absolutely right to be concerned. There's no dishonor in saying, hey, we work in a really small, confined space, and the virus is airborne. Are we sure we're safe? You should be asking that question. It's actually ridiculous that they weren't asking that question earlier. Anna's absolutely right. It was based on optics. And part of it is not just, hey, everything's going to be fine and let's reopen the economy. No, Trump has from day one considered basically a sign of weakness if you're wearing a mask. Why? Because he's profoundly and massively unintelligent. And so and then he's like, he freaked out that his own valet, the guy who serves him food, has coronavirus. And he apparently asked, why wasn't he wearing a mask? Because of you schmuck. You basically said that anybody wearing a mask is weak and shows bad optics. So nobody wore masks. You know how many Secret Service agents have coronavirus? 11. Okay. So now finally they're all wearing masks. Secret Service sits in an office, let's say close to the Oval Office, and apparently it's a tiny room, and there are three of them sit there together. They've been sitting there breathing the same air. And yes, Karen and anyone else could have picked it up from a surface, from airborne, etc. That's how the virus works. But Trump is freaked out about it internally because, of course, he doesn't want to get it. But what are the rules you're imposing on everyone else? And I agree with Mark Cuban. He went on TV today and said, look, my standard is whatever the White House is doing, I'm going to do for my employees, and we should do for everyone. So if they're cleaning, double cleaning, they're checking every day and doing tests every day, why should that be only for the elites? That's a fine standard to have for everybody. I kind of love that point. There's different things that I disagree with Mark on, but it's hard to argue with that. And of course, Trump doesn't want that. He wants incredibly safe work environment for himself now that he finally realizes the disease is contagious. But for the rest of you, back to the mines.
All right. Well, we got to take a quick break. But when we come back, we have more news for you, including updates to the tragic murder of Ahmaud Arbery in Georgia. You don't want to miss that story. And also Senator Lamar Alexander, he's self-quarantining, and I'll tell you why. Come right back.
Are you a politician with a ridiculous point to make? Are you in need of a petulant, outdated way to make it? Then you'll need one of my signs. Hi, I'm Simon Simonson of Simonson Signs. We'll take the stupid, over-the-top, meaningless allegory you have and put it on foam core. So maybe someone will notice your grandstanding. Because this is C-SPAN. And anything that's not people milling around in front of a running vote count is almost considered moderately entertaining. The bar is low, just like our prices. We've got plenty of designs. We also brought you Mike Lee's Tauntauns. They're tons of fun. What does this have to do with the Green New Deal? About as much as this other visual aid he used of Reagan on a T-Rex. Or is that a Velociraptor? Who cares? Who the cares? No one gives a Call us now at Simon Simonson Signs. We'll make your stupid point stupidly for money today.
Viewers had asked for an interview with the TYT Lizard. Mr. Lizard. Oh, you changed colors today. Nice. I don't even know how you feel about us. Do you even like us?
Well, you guys made me this awesome house, so I'm kind of in your debt. I was found outside on the street, and you gave me a home. Granted, it was a really crappy home for a while, but then through the power of fundraising, I became a person who has a multi-level Trump-style mansion.
You do. By the way, you've never looked better, man. Normally, you're just green or just brown, but today you're in mid-lizard, right?
I'm not very smart. I'm a lizard, so I don't know how the science works. I guess this is just my mood. It's not every day that thresholds like this are broken. I'm just so excited. I can't contain my pigmentation.
And now you're showing it off.
Yep.
Yeah, I've never seen the lizard like this before.
You want to know how you could save money and save the planet? Hello, I got an awesome option for you guys. Aspiration.com/TYT. You plant not 1, not 5, 10 trees when you sign up. You know what trees do? Not a big deal, but one large tree can provide a day's supply of oxygen for up to 4 people. That's 40 people's oxygen just by signing up at aspiration.com/TYT. Sign up for a free spend and save account right now at aspiration.com/TYT.
That 300 million is a pretty good number, we were doing a press release on it, and I got all worked up. And I said, okay, well, that's the size of the U.S. population. You know what our next target is? The size of the entire world on the road to 6 billion. Although by the time we hit it, it'll probably be 7, maybe 8 billion.
Not a big deal. A couple of days ago on the TYT network, we passed 1 billion views.
What the hell?
What the hell?
That's a big freaking deal.
2 billion views.
What now?
Sorry.
What did we do? 2 billion?
2 billion.
They said it couldn't be done, but it was done.
We just crossed 5 billion views on YouTube.
I mean, imagine 10 years ago thinking, one day.
We looked at you like, are you nuts? Young Turks crosses 6 billion views.
Young Turks has just passed another milestone, 10 billion views.
Damn.
Guys, as we're all home, we're using the internet way more. You need your internet protected. You don't want prying eyes in there. No hackers. Dun, 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 dun. They're there. Actually, they're now more active than ever. So make sure you got a VPN. NordVPN has been with the Young Turks for a long time. They're one of the best services available. So NordVPN.com/TYT, and you get a free month extra. Plus, you get 70% off of a 3-year plan. NordVPN.com/TYT. All right, back on the Young Turks, guys. First, let me just quickly tell you about Aspiration. They're a sponsor of ours. Your deposits are totally fossil fuel free, and when you sign up for an account, they plant 10 trees for you, and you can keep planting trees throughout. It's a great place to keep your money. Aspiration.com/TYT is where you sign up. And if you noticed, some of you, I hope, did, our programming now starting at 4:30 p.m. Eastern. We keep moving back the time because we added Josh Fox, Stay Home with Josh Fox. So that's a great show that now leads into the conversation, which is at 5 o'clock. And then, of course, the Young Turks at 6 o'clock live. So a lot more live programming on the network. Let me go to some of your comments now. Dagger Dandy says, is it true that there's an exclusive shirt with a current donation drive? I have the one from the Amplify drive, and I could use another that also comes with a good cause. Well, obviously, I'm happy you asked that. Yes, absolutely. There's a great We Press On t-shirt that I have. Like, I'm doing laundry more often, so I can just wear that shirt more often. I love it so much. And yes, if you give $127, we throw in that t-shirt for you. If you give $1,000, there's a hoodie version of that we throw in for you. You can do that at tyt.com/go. So we really appreciate you doing that. And then YouTube super chat, the progressive linguist says, Jake, of course, MAGA folks believe it's not necessary. They don't even believe the number of Americans who have died is true. That's unfortunately correct. A lot of them don't believe that. Brandon Golden says, watching you guys while still in lockdown in Chicago, upgraded my membership from $5 tier to $25 and donated to the drive to keep up the great work we need you guys doing every day. Love you guys. Brandon, love you too. Thank you. If you want to upgrade your membership, that would be incredibly helpful. tyt.com/upgrade. Look, one of the reasons we're hurting these days is folks have less money and we now have less membership as well. So if you can sign up or if you can upgrade, that would make a giant difference. tyt.com/join to make that happen. If you're watching on YouTube, there's also a join button underneath. And last one is just Havoc King Drago. You expect a mouth breather and sniffer to wear a mask? That's like expecting him to read past 2 pages. That's a good point. He does do a lot of, I don't know how that goes over in a mask. Thank you for participating in the show, guys. We really appreciate it. All right, Anna, what's next?
All right. Senator Lamar Alexander happens to be one of Trump's fierce allies who has been named responsible for leading the effort to reopen the country after the pandemic, or as we've been seeing, during the pandemic. But now he's self-quarantining because one of his staffers tested positive for the virus. So his chief of staff spoke to The Hill, and here's what we know. David Cleary says, after discussing this with the Senate's attending physician, Senator Alexander, out of an abundance of caution, has decided not to return to Washington, D.C. and will self-quarantine in Tennessee for 14 days. Now, Senator Alexander also appears to be somewhat alarmed about the severity of coronavirus, which is something that I hope he keeps in mind as he leads the effort to prematurely open the country back up. He was quoted as saying this: there ought to be enough tests to test 535 members of Congress who come to one of the nation's coronavirus hotspots before they go back home around the country and infect people in their districts. Now, I'm going to wait and see what the reaction is going to be from the Trump administration, because he's clearly pointing to the lack of available testing. What I do know is he's already attempted to kind of backpedal and just walk back his comments, because we know that Trump isn't going to like that kind of statement. So here he is walking back what he previously said about the lack of testing.
Have been calling for expanded testing for members of Congress. And there were reports, you said you were wearing a mask, but that several members were not wearing masks, nor were some Capitol police officers. Do you feel safe in the Capitol?
Oh, I think it's safe. Most everyone I see is wearing a mask. Maybe some were not. I know that senators, even when we see each other, we stay 6 feet apart. We're practicing, by and large, the protocols. What I said was that I thought we ought to accept President Trump's offer to test members of Congress who are here before they go home for the weekend. Not so much to protect the members of Congress, but to protect the people they might infect.
No, I love the way he just twisted that to make it seem like, and it's actually pretty masterful, right? Just make it seem like Trump is the one who wants expanded testing for people. He's the one fighting and pushing for it. So that way he can kind of avoid Trump's wrath, which we know is coming.
Yeah, the wrath is coming. But Trump doesn't really care if you guys get tested, but he does want more people around him tested. So it's not untrue that he would rather have congressmen and senators tested more. He's just against testing in general, because then you're going to find out a lot more people have coronavirus. But he himself, of course, doesn't want to get it. He doesn't want his Republican allies to get it, and or anyone in the elites. So, my God, if he found out his donors are getting it, then we'd have completely different situation in America. But the great part of the Lamar Alexander story is he's heading up a committee to reopen the country, and now he has to do it from self-quarantine. And so he's going to zoom into the committee hearings. Look, I'm not going outside. You're crazy, dog. But the rest of you, let's talk about how you guys should go outside and go back to work. Go back to work? No, I'm quarantining down in Tennessee in my comfortable home. I ain't going to Washington, D.C. I ain't going to work. You're crazy. And then meanwhile, by the way, the same hearing, the head of the FDA quarantine will be, I don't know if it's Zoom or Skype, but doing it on video. Head of the CDC quarantined, doing it on video. Dr. Fauci, there's conflicting reports. He might or might not show up in person. He's doing a quasi-quarantine. So, wow, already before the hearings even started, it sounds so convincing that we should all go back out and start reopening America.
It's insane. And unfortunately, there are already states that have opened back up. Texas is one of them. And just over the weekend, there were literally hundreds of people at a party, a gathering at a park. And we don't know why yet, but someone ended up opening fire and 5 people were wounded. But what happened to, oh, no, don't worry. We're reopening, but we're going to do it responsibly. We're going to implement the distancing guidelines. We're going to make sure that we keep people safe. No, you're not. That's not what's happening in Texas. That's not what's happening in Georgia. That's not what's happening in many of the states that have decided to reopen. And unfortunately, we are seeing a spike in the number of people testing positive for coronavirus in those states. And the markets react to that. If the Trump administration only cares about what the numbers are, how the economy is impacted by it, well, the markets are reacting negatively to this uptick in coronavirus cases in states that have prematurely opened. How did they not see this coming? Like, it's amazing to me.
Yeah, well, how did they not see 1,000 things coming? But you wondered why there was a shooting in a park in Texas. Well, number one, because it's America. Number two, because it's Texas. And number three, people haven't been able to shoot someone in a long time, and Americans are getting antsy. So maybe a slight positive side effect coronavirus there's been less mass shootings because people are indoors. But the minute we let them out in Texas, oh, great, a lot of people are in a park. Let's start shooting. This country is crazy in 18 different ways.
We're going to take a quick break, but when we come back, we have a pretty giant block to give you updates on what's happening in the Ahmaud Arbery case. Lots of updates that you should know about, so don't miss it. Come right back.
Can you name the representative of your district?
The representative of my district? Oof.
I have no idea.
I actually don't know who the representative of my district is.
Do you know what the corporate tax rate is?
I think it's pretty high. I should know this.
Like in between 20 and 25%? I don't know.
How many amendments are in the U.S. Constitution?
Oh, no. This brings me back to grade school.
I should know this because I was a history major, but I do not remember.
I don't know that. I don't know.
I don't know.
I have no clue.
Nope. I don't know the answer to that one.
You don't know? I didn't know. It's time to change that. We live in the best country in the world. We live in the most powerful country in the world. We love our American freedom, but only half of us take part in the political process. Only half of us vote. We don't fulfill our duties as U.S. citizens to make this country a better place. It's time that we use our voices as a team, as a country, to become better. We will stand up. We will be empowered. We will stay educated and informed about politics every single day because it's our responsibility. And Politiscope just made it easy for you. So join me, join us, and let's be Americans.
The TYT affiliate program's finally here. Now you think, finally, I didn't know about it, but I did. I've been waiting to do this for a long, long time. Why? Because it's the best win-win we got. When we make money, you make money. When you make money, we make money. Hey, that's how we're supposed to do it as progressives. We're supposed to do it together. So this way, we're not the Young Turks, you're the Young Turks. How many times have I told you that? And now in this case,
that actually even applies to us selling membership together. Now, look, another part of the win is that you get to spread the message about the progressive point of view. And that's awesome. So we're doing good in the world, but on top of that, you get commission on it. So all you got to do is set up your free account. Once you complete that easy process, you receive your free personalized link, and then you start sharing that with everybody, and then voila, you're in the ball game. Look, guys, I'd ask you to do this anyway because it's important to spread the message, and it's important to keep the lights on to support independent media and the home of progressives. But in this case, I think it's even better because then we get to grow together, and every little bit helps, not just for us, but for you guys. So if this could be a nice way to get a little bit extra cash while doing something wonderful in the world, well, I love that. So that's why we thought of this, and we hope that you participate, and I'm really, really psyched about it. Let's do this together.
ShopTYT.com now has books. One of them is Ryan Grimm's book, We've Got People. That's a saying that AOC said, they've got money, we've got people. It's the best tracing of the AOC victory I have seen anywhere. It's the most accurate, and it's got great details. The book actually goes all the way back to Jesse Jackson and how he was the original Bernie Sanders. If you want to know how we're going to win going forward, those lessons are super important, and they're in Ryan's book. So check it out right now at ShopTYT.com. All right, back on the Young Turks, Cenk and Anna with you. One more note from a sponsor. As we're all staying at home and using our computers a lot more, you got to protect it. There's 1,000 different things you have to protect it from, but also one of those is hackers, and you don't want them getting your private information. So the way to protect your computer is through a VPN. Our sponsor is nordvpn.com/TYT. If you use that code, you get 70% off a 3-year deal. And an extra month free. So make sure you're going to nordvpn.com/TYT. And I use it, and you could use it for up to 6 devices. Okay, so your comments. Cray Souffle says, hey, Cenk, any thoughts about the California 25 race? That's tomorrow. So we're going to talk about it in the post game today for the members because there's an insane request by the Republicans. So don't miss that. TYT.com/join to become a member. And then tomorrow we're doing special election coverage. It's actually a really big day tomorrow. It's California 25. There's some reason to believe the Republicans might pick up that seat, and not just because I'm not the Democratic candidate there, but also because tomorrow's Nebraska. Cara Eastman's the best chance we have left probably for a progressive to pick up a seat. So our election coverage starts at 6:30 Pacific, 9:30 Eastern. Don't miss that. It's going to be me, Michael Schur, and John Irola with you guys. And then I've just got one comment more for you. The good doctor writes in, just imagine telling someone it's perfectly okay for them to go out to the minefield and while you wait back behind in a safe place. And that's exactly what they're doing in a sense. Andrew P. on Twitter also had a good comment. He said, Trump might not be putting the mask on because he's worried about it's going to mess up his hair. I actually don't think that that's crazy. I think that there's some
no, of course
that's
not.
true.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. And Anna, real quick, let me just check tyt.com/go. Of course, that's the audience funding. Another way to support the show. We're at 100,867. All kidding aside, it'd be amazing to see 101,000 before we end the show today. Anna, you're up next.
All right. Well, we have some updates on the Ahmaud Arbery case. Now, Ahmaud Arbery was gunned down by the McMichaels, Travis and Gregory McMichaels. And what they claimed was that they saw Arbery going into homes and suspected him to be someone connected to a string of burglaries in the area. Now, let me be clear about one thing before we move on with the rest of the details. There were no reports of a string of burglaries in the area. However, a video has emerged showing Arbery walking into a construction site. And I want to also be clear that the video does not indicate that Arbery has done anything wrong. I'll give you those details after we watch this clip. Take a look.
We have some new imagery that's come to light. I should point out this really is not new. It is additional footage. The investigators have had this for some time, and the GBI admits that they saw this footage even before they went out and made the arrest of the McMichaels. And what this video shows is Ahmaud Arbery on the day that he died inside of a house under construction. It's surveillance video. You see it briefly. He walks around a bit, and then he goes out and continues his run through the neighborhood. He doesn't take anything, and the most trouble he would be in would be, I guess, for trespassing. That is not a felony offense, and it would not justify the citizen's arrest law or hot pursuit.
Yeah. So that's the video that conservatives are now latching onto as a justification for gunning someone down in cold blood. But I want to note that that construction site was a construction site. And many people, myself included, have done the exact same thing that Arbery is seen doing in that video. He didn't take anything. The owner of the property made it abundantly clear that he wasn't robbed, he wasn't burglarized. The owner is Larry English, and he said the following to the press: "I've never had a police report or anything stolen from my property or any kind of robbery." English says it's not likely his family will move into the home due to death threats that he's now getting. He has also voiced condolences to Arbery's mother, saying, quote, "I don't think anybody should ever have to lose a child. It's not supposed to be that way." So English hasn't done anything wrong. He's not one of these people who's accusing Arbery of stealing anything or burglarizing homes. He's just the unfortunate person who owns the property that was under construction, and he wanted to let people know that nothing was stolen from him.
All right. So first of all, what that video shows Arbery doing is nothing. It's literally the opposite of the evidence that they're looking for. They're saying, oh, they were chasing him down because they thought he was a burglar, except the video shows he didn't take anything. So they didn't say that they were chasing him down for trespassing. They said because they were, and if it's earlier in the same day, and their theory is that he burglarized the place, when he's jogging, he doesn't have anything on him. So, I mean, you saw there's like sheetrock, there's stuff like that. You'd see the sheetrock if he was running away with it. So none of this makes any sense. By the way, if you really actually do suspect someone of committing burglary and you're really concerned about it, there's a thing called 911 where you actually call real police instead of going out with a shotgun and seeing what happens. So that's insanity. Secondly, there are now white people all over the neighborhood contacting the family's attorney, contacting Sean King, saying, I did the same exact thing. I went into that same construction site. I looked around because we were curious because we live in the neighborhood. By the way, Arbery, I think he lives about a mile from there. I've done the same thing that you. I jog, and sometimes I'll see something interesting, and I'll look for a second. And none of us have ever gotten murdered for it.
I'll give you a specific example. There was this incredibly beautiful building in West Hollywood. It was like a pre-war building called El Mirador. And this very unsavory developer purchased the building and then evicted all the people who were living there. But I always found it a fascinating building because of its architecture. So when I knew that no one was living there and that it was going to be under construction, I looked through the windows because I wanted to see what does the architecture inside look like? What is the design? It's just interesting stuff. To then be shot and killed, without any questions whatsoever, is just so disturbing and so disgusting. And the McMichaels lied about how there's been a string of burglaries in the area because there are no reports, no police reports, nothing that indicate that that was happening. And Cenk, you mentioned 911. The McMichaels actually did call 911. And I want you guys to pay close attention to how this conversation went, because the 911 dispatcher makes it clear that she needs to know if Arbery is in the process of committing a crime. And the McMichaels make it clear that no, he's not. So let's listen in on the first clip of this 911 call.
There's a guy in the house right now. It's a house under construction.
Okay, do you have your address or the other house's address?
Right at 219 or 220 Secilla Drive.
And you said someone's breaking into it right now?
No, it's all open. It's under construction. And he's running right now. There he goes right now.
Okay, what is he doing?
He's running down the street.
Okay.
Back into the
Okay, that's fine. I'll get them out there. I just need to know what he was doing wrong. Was he just on the premises and not supposed to be?
Stuff on it, and he's been caught on the camera a bunch before at night. It's kind of an ongoing thing out here. The man that's building the house has got heart issues. I think he's not going to finish it. So.
Okay, that's fine. And you said it was a male in a black t-shirt?
A white t-shirt, black guy, white t-shirt, and he's done running back into the neighborhood.
So you heard the 911 dispatcher there. I just need to know what he's doing wrong, because simply being on a construction site is not a crime.
Yeah. So as you listen to that 911 tape, it clearly reminds you of something. At least it reminds me of something. Trayvon Martin. George Zimmerman calls 911, says, I have a suspicious black guy. They're like, what's he doing? He's like, I don't know. He's like, I'm going to go pursue. They're like, don't pursue. And Zimmerman decides to pursue with a weapon, shoots him dead. He was innocent. Very similar here. 911's like, well, what's he doing wrong? And they're like, I don't know. He's running. Yeah, people run through that neighborhood all the time. It's called jogging. And they pursue him anyway with weapons, and they murder him in cold blood. In the middle of the day. So stop pursuing people just because they're black, and don't pursue them with a weapon. And when you call 911, let them handle it.
Exactly. And that's unfortunately not what happened here. And we have one more audio clip from the 911 call. Let's take a listen to that.
What's the address your emergency?
I'm out here at Satilla Shores. There's a black male running down the street.
Satilla, where at Satilla Shores?
I don't know what street we're on. Stop right there! Is it? Stop! Travis!
Sir, hello, sir. Sir, where you at? Hello? Hello?
So, look, I think it's important to see all the details and hear all the evidence, because what the McMichaels are alleging in their defense is that they were conducting a citizen's arrest. But as we've already said on this show multiple times, what they did does not follow or does not qualify as a citizen's arrest. You have to see the person in the process of committing a crime in order for that to qualify as a citizen's arrest, and you're not allowed to shoot and kill the person. An arrest is different from a murder, obviously. So,
yeah. I've jogged in the neighborhoods for decades, and I don't know how many different things I looked at, but I never got followed with a shotgun. And so many people jog in that neighborhood, they never get followed with a shotgun. You follow somebody with a shotgun, at some point, you might use it. And so, for God's sake, man, stop shooting unarmed black people. I don't care if they were jogging or barbecuing or mowing the lawn or at an Airbnb. So many different times, either they call the cops on people, or worse yet, they pursue it on their own and kill people. It happened again in this case. How long can people continue to be outraged by this, and it still continues? Our government has to actually protect its own citizens. And yes, sometimes from people who want to take the law into their own hands. And there's so often we have completely unequal justice in this country. And so the prosecutors had these videos the whole time, and they didn't do anything until there was public pressure. Sickening.
Well, we have one other update to this story that I want you all to know about, so let's talk about that. When it comes to investigating the murder of Ahmaud Arbery, oftentimes you'll hear that there are three suspects. First, there are the McMichaels, Gregory and Travis, and then there's the individual who's actually filming the video, and that person is William Roddy Bryan, who appears to still get haircuts from his mother. But we'll go ahead and put that aside for now because this story is about how he feels like his life is in danger because of the death threats he's receiving for filming that video. Now, there are a lot of questions about, why he filmed the video, why he was there on the scene. And he spoke to his attorney, who then spoke to the press and gave this reasoning for it. Take a listen.
Did the attorney explain or respond to why would his client be videotaping anyway, if not for the fact that he was expecting to capture something on video?
Right. And we did have this conversation. Essentially, he believed what he saw was he was standing in his yard and he saw the young man being pursued. And he thought perhaps this was some sort of criminal activity he was witnessing, and he wanted to get a picture of Ahmaud, he says, in case he got away and they were able to show to authorities who the person was. Again, he claims that this was all being an observer, not being a participant, but that is hard to fathom given that explanation.
So he is being investigated. He has not been charged yet. But according to an interview that he gave, William Roddy Bryan, that's his name, and his fiance spoke to Action News in Jacksonville. And he says he and his family have been receiving death threats since the video leaked online last week. He was quoted as saying, "I had nothing to do with it. I'm trying to get my life back to normal. And it's been smeared for the last week. I was told I was a witness and I'm not sure what I am, other than receiving a bunch of threats. I'd be lying if I didn't say I wasn't scared." Anyway, and then he says, if that's what they wanted to do was scare me, they've scared me. So he's afraid for his life. And look, I don't think anybody should be afraid for their lives. I don't think anyone should deal with any type of death threats. I personally know what that feels like, and it is terrifying. At the same time, though, I personally do not buy his argument that he wasn't involved in any way, that he was just simply like some innocent person who happened to see what was going on and decided to film it.
Well, apparently authorities have some testimony saying that he might have actually cut off Arbery's exit. And so that's super relevant. Look, it's a no-brainer to not do death threats. Obviously, don't do that. That's totally counterproductive, hypocritical. It makes no sense. And the homeowner's getting death threats. Why? Well, the homeowner didn't do anything. And in fact, he said nothing was taken from his house. But that distracts from the main issue here. The real issue is, if it's true that he was actively participating, especially if he cut off Arbery and would not let him escape what wound up being his murder, well, then obviously he should be charged. Those are ifs. The authorities who didn't want to investigate this in the first place, I hope they do a better job. There's a new prosecutor, and they have charged the people who actually did the shooting. But yes, they should definitely consider charging this guy as well. And it seems like he knew those folks who were pursuing them. So did they talk about this ahead of time? Did they plan it ahead of time? They said that they'd seen him going into that house several times. So did they talk to this guy, hey, when we do follow him with a shotgun, you should tape it or maybe cut off his exit path, etc. Well, those are massively relevant to whether he should be charged in the murder.
Right, because, if you go back and you watch that horrific video, you see that this guy is filming from behind, right? Arbery is running. By the way, we're showing the video right now. It is graphic for anyone who might not want to look at this. He's filming from behind, and you see Arbery get blocked by the McMichaels and their truck, right? And according to reporting, Bryan is mentioned briefly in the February 23rd police report, where it says, McMichael stated that Arbery turned around and began running back the direction from which he came, and Roddy, this is the guy we're talking about, attempted to block him, which was unsuccessful. Now many are arguing that Bryan trapped Arbery as a result, and was as a result directly involved in Arbery's death. And so, again, that's being investigated, luckily, and we'll see what the outcome of that will be. But it's also kind of fascinating that the person who released that video to a defense attorney was Brian himself, right? So he releases it to this defense attorney. Defense attorney sees it. Let me just note that Brian is not a client of his. And apparently the attorney was disturbed by the video and leaked it to a local radio show host who then uploaded it onto YouTube. Had that not happened, no one would ever be investigated or charged in the murder of Arbery. It's crazy.
Yeah. You know what? I actually think that this is my theory, that the lawyer released it because at least somebody involved in the shooting wanted it to be released. Because the lawyer said it wasn't two men with a Confederate flag in the back of a truck going down the road and shooting a jogger in the back. It got the truth out there so that what you could see, my purpose was not to exonerate them or convict them. I think they actually believe that that video was helpful to their case. Man, were they wrong. And it shows you how twisted their view of the world is.
All right. In the postgame show, we have lots of great stories, including Republicans who are trying to sabotage California's 23rd district congressional race. Don't miss that story and more. Become a member at tyt.com/join.
All right, back at the Young Turks. Cenk and Anna with you guys post-game. Well, first story is one that I was at least partly involved in for a while. I think you guys will see what I'm talking about when Anna starts.
Yep. All right. So Republicans can't seem to figure out whether they're in favor of mail-in voting or if they're against mail-in voting. And I would venture to say that it really depends on the race and how it impacts them. So case in point, California's special election for the 25th district congressional race. Now, let me just note that California happens to be the first state that has committed to sending mail-in ballots to every single registered voter. And of course, this is the common sense move to make when you're concerned about how the pandemic is going to impact the voter turnout. And so I'm glad Gavin Newsom's doing that. And remember, Donald Trump himself did not like the idea of mail-in ballots because he thinks that it opens up opportunities for fraud, even though there's absolutely no evidence of that. Well, now in California's 25th district, it turns out that not only can people vote by mail, but they can also vote at these designated voting places, which will implement the social distancing guidelines necessary to keep people safe if they choose to vote in person. And Republicans are now saying that having a voting place open, specifically in Lancaster County, California, is a big problem. So, for instance, Tom Emmer, the leader of the National Republican Congressional Committee, sent a memo to all House Republicans on Saturday with an urgent call to arms that Democrats are trying to steal Tuesday's special election for California's 25th congressional district seat. So his memo specifically says, we're issuing an urgent call to arms regarding the vote by mail California 25th special election happening this Tuesday. It's very clear that Democrats are trying to steal this election, and we need your help raising hell on social media, TV, radio, etc. Now, what they're concerned about is how there will be a special voting place open in Lancaster County so people can vote in person. And Donald Trump has chimed in on this via Twitter, saying Governor Gavin Newsom of California won't let restaurants, beaches, and stores open, but he installs a voting booth system in a highly Democrat area, supposed to be mail-in ballots only, because our great candidate, Mark Garcia, that's the Republican, of course, is winning by a lot. California 25 rigged election. Okay, so just to be clear, this election is between Mike Garcia, who's the Republican, and Christy Smith, who is a Democrat who I have absolutely no love for whatsoever. However, it's important to be principled and protect our democratic process and give people the opportunity to vote if they want to vote. And so, again, Cenk, it amazes me that Republicans didn't like mail-in voting. They hated mail-in voting. Trump claimed that mail-in voting means fraud. And now all of a sudden he's like, oh no, this voting place, no, don't like it. That's not okay. It's not right. I thought they had mail-in voting.
Yeah, they forced Wisconsin to vote. People got sick in Wisconsin by going to those voting areas. And they loved it because they thought they were going to win that election. Now, furthermore, this needs real clarity. There are other places where you could, they have voting booths where they follow these rules. This is adding one in Lancaster, which is a different city than Palmdale. The Republicans are saying, well, they're close to each other, 10 minutes apart, so why don't they just go to the one in Palmdale? So they're not, normally what happens with Republicans is when they're in charge, they close down voting booths in minority areas, college campuses, any place likely to vote Democratic. And they open up more places in areas that are more likely to vote Republican. In this case, it's California, so they can't control the state. They're not criticizing the Democratic governor for closing down voting areas in places that are Republican. They're criticizing him for opening up a voting area where Democrats might vote. So, that is unreal. So they're like, why won't the Democratic governor do voter suppression? It's outrageous. We demand voter suppression like we do in the red states, and I can't believe he's letting people vote. But wait a minute, how could voting in person, other than the health considerations, which you say you don't care about at all, How could it possibly be wrong? It's like one thing for the Republicans to defend then closing down voting areas, which is what they do all the time. It's another thing to insist that you not open them up in a whole city where people could go and vote. Even the Republican mayor of Lancaster, Rex Parris, is like, yeah, no, we're our own city. Obviously, we need this area.
Yeah, Jen, can I actually read you his statement? Because I think that the context is important. His political affiliation is important. And so Mayor Rex Parris, who is a Republican, says this is something the county should fix immediately. There should not be even the appearance of affecting the outcome by limiting the ability to vote. I want Mike to win. I think he'd be a better congressman, but I don't want to jimmy the election. And you know what? I commend him for that. He's being principled. He understands the importance of our democratic process. He understands the importance of making it as easy as possible for everyone who wants to vote to be able to exercise that right. But the Republicans on a federal level clearly do not care about democracy. They do not want the people of Lancaster County to have various options available to them if they want to cast their ballot. And it's gross. Like, this is the type of stuff that you should expect for Republicans, but nothing's ever being done about it. Trump naming a loyalist of his as the postmaster general in a year where the general election is really going to rely on mail-in voting is a disaster. And we need to do something about that right now. And I just feel like there isn't enough emphasis on that.
So for those of you who don't remember, I ran in this race, okay, or who never found out in the first place. So I lost in the first round of the primary. So I know these areas really, really well, and I know the characters here. So Rex Parris is a complicated guy, but on many issues, he's massively right-wing. He tried to make it illegal to give food to the homeless in Lancaster. He told people that they should carry around weapons in case they confront homeless people. He is saying in that quote, I want the Republican to win really badly, Mike Garcia, right? And Rex Parris is very, very Republican. And he's saying, but why shouldn't we have a voting area in my city? That doesn't make any sense. Of course it doesn't make any sense. And so, look, there's two things about this. One is, yeah, Republicans cry about anything. We know that already. And it's called crying to the refs. Some sports teams do it. Every soccer star does it. This is the equivalent of them throwing themselves onto the ground, going, oh my God, as if they got hurt really badly when they didn't get hurt at all, right? But it goes all the way up to their president. Trump gets involved in every little thing where he can cry and whine, etc. He brings up every little star they have. Meanwhile, on the Democratic side, they never back anybody, right? So, and they never fight back. They never do any of the things that the Republicans do to affect the voting. And so you have an uneven playing field where the Republicans run roughshod in the states that they run. They suppress voting in every way imaginable. And then we turn around and that leads to the second point, as always, with the media. What, are we having a real conversation over this? Are you insane? I don't care that they're crying. No, their main argument is, for no reason at all, you should have less voting in this one city. How could that possibly be a legitimate argument? That doesn't make it. They're not saying you close down voting areas where Republicans could have voted. They're saying don't open one up in an area where Democrats might vote. That's insanity. That's not a real conversation. They should be, the press, if they had any guts at all, should mock the Republicans and say this is clearly voter disenfranchisement and another example of Republicans not wanting people to vote. And Trump, in this situation, not in California 25, but a couple of weeks ago, about mail-in ballots, said if you have mail-in ballots, the Republicans will never win another election. He admitted it. It's all about voter suppression. For God's sake, call it what it is.
Exactly. All right, well, let's move on to one other story that just should blow your mind, especially when Republicans pose as people who actually care about Americans suffering in this economy. So Trump's trade advisor, Peter Navarro, was recently interviewed on Fox News about the increase in the unemployment rate and how that number could quickly reach 20 to 25%. And here's what he had to say about it.
Those two top advisors saying it's going to be 20%, 25% unemployment. Even temporarily, there are a lot of people hurting. And as you said, it's going to be temporary, and we're going to get back to normal eventually over a very long period of time.
Here's what look. We are the greatest country in the world. There is this American exceptionalism because we're the greatest innovators. We're the freest country in the world, and we're the strongest. And this pity party yesterday is not who we are. Who we are is who this president is, and we're going to go forward with a mission. We are at war. Make no mistake about that. The Chinese unleashed a virus on the world that we're going to have to deal with. But we can do that with the indomitable spirit of this country in a way which will make us stronger and more resilient. Right. So every time you hear that pity party stuff, remember to look into the future, see where we need to go.
So, Cenk, if you happen to be one of the 30 million Americans who was laid off, fired, furloughed in response to this pandemic, and you're unable to put food on the table for your kids, like, don't cry about it. I mean, he doesn't want to hear about this pity party. And like, I respect that honesty, because remember, it's the Trump administration that keeps claiming that all of these protesters in some of the purple states demanding that their states reopen as soon as possible are just concerned. Like, they're pretending like they're really concerned about the finances of these individuals, when in reality, they don't care at all. And I think Peter Navarro makes that clear in the video we just showed you.
All right. There's so many crazy things he said in a short period of time. Let's go one by one. So he says, America's number one. Well, kind of. That's true. We're number one in number of coronavirus cases, and we're number one in number of coronavirus deaths. So it's possible that other countries like China might have more, and they're just lying about it. That actually is possible. But most of the world is not lying about it, and our cases are raging, totally raging, out of control. Over 1.3 million, almost 1.4 million cases. Over 81,000 deaths. We have more cases than the next top 5 countries combined. And this repugnant character goes on TV to do this weird jingoistic act right now. Like, oh, America's exceptional. We're so good because we're free. Like, really, this is the time you're bragging about America being number one? And what does that mean we're exceptional? Are we can't get the virus? Well, that's funny, because we just did a story about how 2 people in the White House got the virus. Sound very exceptional. And we have the most amount of cases. So maybe we're exceptional in being exceptionally susceptible to this disease. On what basis are you bragging about how great America is today? Look, there's many reasons why you can say America has done good in the world in other instances, but this one? Okay, so then he says, America is like this president. Well, I'm a little afraid that might be true. But man, I've never seen anyone insult America as deeply as that. So I guess he's saying in the context of coronavirus, Americans are so stupid that they think maybe you should inject Lysol into your veins or your lungs to cure this. Thinks that a virus, I mean, how would you get it out? What, you get it out of the blue? I mean, I didn't understand how that's how you do it. And incompetent, you name it, etc. And then finally you get to Anna's point about, he's like, oh yeah, 30 million people unemployed, but I'm not one of them, and neither are any of my rich friends. So what do you want me to do, have a pity party for you? Back to the mines. Oh, you guys are contracting in where you're working at a meat packing factory or an Amazon warehouse or at a fast food restaurant. So what? Who cares? Don't have a pity party. Get back out there, and then if you have to go home, not only do you contract it, but you might give it to your parents and they might die. Whatever. I don't have time for a pity party. We're number one. These are the kind of idiots that run our government now.
Yeah, maybe we're being unfair to Navarro, and maybe all we need to do is just have a conversation with him and explain simple concepts to him. So, for instance, he seems to have a difficult time understanding what qualifies as a pity party. And so Brett Ehrlich, one of our wonderful producers here, put together a great video to demonstrate just what a pity party looks like. Let's take a look.
I wish we had a fair media in this country.
It's so unfair. It's so unfair.
You're never going to treat me fairly, many of you. The worst, most unfair press treatment, they say, in the history of the United States for a president.
What they did to him is very unfair, in my opinion. And what they did to General Flynn is very unfair, in my opinion. And what they did to so many others is very unfair.
I am greeted with a hostile press, the likes of which no president has ever seen. The closest would be that gentleman right up there. They always said Lincoln. Nobody got treated worse than Lincoln. I believe I am treated worse. Yeah, no, I don't take responsibility at all.
That is what a pity party looks like. When the most powerful person in the world constantly cries like a little baby over nonsense. Like, oh, everyone's so mean to me. That's a pity party.
Yeah. But, you know, we showed you a bunch of clips put together there from recent events. That clip could have gone on for hours and hours and hours. The entire time that he's been in office, his main sentiment can be summarized in, wah! Earlier in this crisis, he was complaining that the press was being unfair to him because they weren't giving him credit for how good his ratings were for the coronavirus press briefings. You're not giving me credit for my ratings. Oh, so what? People are being taken out in body bags, but I got good ratings and you're not giving me credit. That little bitch is your so-called great president that you go around going, America's like Donald Trump, we're number one. You guys are all pathetic, pathetic. And you see the last part of what Navarro did was there, again, going after the Chinese. And you know what? The media in this country drives me nuts in how they want to cater to power. Now I see mainstream media outlets referring to China as a Chinese communist government.
It's amazing. It's amazing.
Amazing. It's not because they're not communist, although they're really not communist. I mean, they're technically call themselves communists, but they're uber capitalists now in China. But that's not why. It's because the press did not call them that before. They just called them the Chinese government. But now the Republicans have a talking point saying every Republican official should call them the Chinese communist government. And so now the press, like sheep, like pathetic little sheeple, are starting to write in their articles the Chinese communist government. They have changed their language to be more politically correct to appease Republicans. These are the clowns you're appeasing. It's absolutely pathetic.
Oh, yeah. And that, like the messaging runs deep, like the way Republicans shape the messaging of our so-called journalists runs deep. And that's a perfect segue to our next story. So let's discuss what happened with Meet the Press over the weekend. So Donald Trump spent the majority of Mother's Day doing exactly what you would expect Donald Trump to do, going on a Twitter meltdown over the way Meet the Press, and specifically Chuck Todd, talked about William Barr's decision to basically drop the case against former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn. Now, what Chuck Todd did in the segment about this was show the exact same video clip, which we showed here on TYT. It was when William Barr was being interviewed and he was asked about how history would look back at the decision that he made. And here's how it went.
You brought up Bill Barr. Peggy Noonan, I want you to listen to this Bill Barr answer to a question about what will history say about this. Wait till you hear this answer. Take a listen.
When history looks back on this decision, how do you think it will be written?
Well, history's written by the winner, so it largely depends on who's writing the history.
I was struck, Peggy, by the cynicism of the answer. It's a correct answer, but he's the Attorney General. He didn't make the case that he was upholding the rule of law. He was almost admitting that, yeah, this is a political job.
And I happen to agree with Chuck Todd. William Barr did not make the case throughout that entire interview that he was upholding the rule of law. But now Trump and his lackeys are pretending as though Meet the Press took that clip out of context. They argue that if you allow the clip to play longer, you'll hear William Barr share incredibly important details that justify his actions. So one of the tweets that you probably saw over the weekend by Donald Trump was the following: Sleepy Eyes Chuck Todd should be fired by Comcast NBC for his fraud. He knew exactly what he was doing. Public airwaves equal fake news. And of course, he included the FCC chair, Ajit Pai, to that tweet. That was one of many tweets on this issue. Again, Trump loves to have his weekend meltdowns, even on a day when he's supposed to be celebrating the mother of his children, or one of his children. But here's the full context, because I want you guys to watch the full context for yourselves. And then I want you to ask yourselves, is this something that Meet the Press should have apologized for? Take a look.
When history looks back on this decision, how do you think it will be written?
Well, history's written by the winner, so it largely depends on who's writing the history. But I think a fair history would say it was a good decision because it upheld the rule of law. It upheld the standards of the Department of Justice, and it undid what was an injustice.
So Meet the Press ended up apologizing, even though the so-called full context does not change what William Barr said at all. He did not provide justification for dropping the case against Michael Flynn, who pleaded guilty to lying to the FBI in the Russia investigation. Here's the apology, and then Cenk, I want your thoughts. You're correct. Earlier today, we inadvertently and inaccurately cut short a video clip of an interview with Attorney General Barr before offering commentary and analysis. The remaining clip included important remarks from the Attorney General that we missed, and we regret the error. They're so afraid of Republican backlash, even though they did nothing wrong here. It blows my mind. So,
first of all, Chuck Todd now, of course, trending on Twitter, fire Chuck Todd, and obviously Trump is egging that on. Not only should he not be fired, they should have never apologized in the first place. So, is Barr saying we did the right thing? Of course he's saying that. We all know that. He's not going to come out and go, oh, yeah, we lied. Flynn's totally guilty. It's an unbelievable miscarriage of justice, but we did it because might makes right, and etc. And I would add, if I was making up a ridiculous overstatement, and hey, history's written by the winners. Except he did say that part. He even said that part. So the context does not help Barr at all. So it's what is it, Anna? Over 2,000 former Department of Justice officials wrote a letter saying that William Barr should resign. Because they're like, no, this is an unbelievable miscarriage of justice. So Flynn has admitted in open court twice, yes, I lied to the FBI. And Barr, throughout that interview, we covered it. We gave you the full context. His thesis was, well, yes, he lied. And that's illegal, but there was no underlying crime and he should have never been investigated in the first place. So, wait a minute. If there was no underlying crime and he should have never been investigated, why was he lying about meeting with the Russian ambassador? Why would you lie about that? So that goes to show you they really should have been investigating because he was clearly covering something up. But throughout, Barr's like, yeah, whatever. We did the right thing. And then with a smirk on his face, as you saw, he said, hey, history's written by the winners. And almost looking exactly like Pepe the Frog that he is, as he stated that. So Chuck Todd was right to play that clip. And look, here's a guy, me, and Anna, by the way, us being principled. We have criticized Chuck Todd a lot of times on this program. And I think absolutely rightfully so. But that is a constructive critique based on actual facts. Here, if a progressive brought this case against Chuck Todd and Meet the Press, it is impossible, comical to think that they would have changed the story or apologized. There's no way they would have done that. But the Republicans go, boo, and they're like, oh, sorry, and then they apologize for no reason. You should have the spine to back up Chuck Todd here. Instead, NBC, as usual, with most of the mainstream media, absolutely cowers in front of the Republicans.
Exactly. So those are the stories we have for you. And if you guys check out our YouTube channel, I did a live video today about that letter that was signed by nearly 2,000 former DOJ officials who are calling on William Barr to resign. But, look, to be honest, I'm not surprised by anything William Barr does. As soon as he was named the Attorney General, the first thing he did was launch an investigation into the Russia investigation. So he was looking for anything to undermine or discredit the Mueller report. And one thing that I found super fascinating about that story regarding the letter signed by those DOJ officials is that one of the reports that William Barr was hanging on to in order to justify dropping the case against Michael Flynn did not say what William Barr said it said. It actually totally twisted the report's findings in a way to claim that the FBI was guilty of entrapment in the way that they handled Michael Flynn. It's just ridiculous.
All right, last thing on this. A couple of months ago, the Democrat, that's a funny Freudian slip. The Democratic senators who voted to confirm him, like Manchin and Sinema, came out and said, maybe we shouldn't have taken him at his word. We're beginning to regret voting yes on Barr. It's just, I can't. Just vomitous. Barr wrote a memo when he was a private citizen saying that Trump should be above the law. And then Trump appointed him for Attorney General. You didn't see this coming? I mean, that's an admission by those senators. We are the world's dumbest people. We're the most naive, silly, insubstantial people. It turns, oh my God, Trump appointed him because Barr preemptively said he'd let him get away with anything, and now Barr is letting him get away with anything? Well, we couldn't have seen that coming. Oh, please spare me. God damn it, man. Can't stand these people. And Trump has to lose. The fact that it's Biden versus Trump is maddening. But we cannot have Trump win. We cannot have him win. If he wins and Barr's the Attorney General, this country is not going to. It's not a possibility to slip into fascism. It will slip into fascism. It will. They are fascist in their bones. They hate the rule of law. They hate the Constitution restricting their power grab, and they will not tolerate it. And if you don't think so, you're being as naive as Manchin and Sinema were, thinking that Trump won't do everything he can to destroy this country and to have absolute power. And with enablers like Barr, he'll be able to get away with everything. With Democratic opponents that are so weak, like Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer, he'll run roughshod over them. It'll be a dystopian nightmare if Trump is reelected. So the corporate Democrats wanted the perfect boogeyman. Unfortunately, they got it. Be careful what you wish for. They better not lose to him again, because if they do, then that boogeyman's going to run amok, and God help this country.
Yep.
All right. TYT.com/go. Light in the darkness. All right. Much love, guys. We will see you tomorrow, not only for the regular show, but remember, now things start at 4:30 p.m. Eastern live with Staying Home with Josh Fox. Then you got interviews. Then you got the main show. Tomorrow you got Old School and then special election coverage. And there's one fun fact about my election I didn't tell you guys today that I'll tell you during our special election coverage. So you have that to look forward to. All right. Much love. We'll see you then.